What's up, guys? Welcome to Metalcore Nerds. I'm Sean Mott. Wow. So today is talking all about Mandalorian, mostly season 2, but we do dive a little into season 1 and talk about a lot of things in the complete Star Wars universe. But I have Nic and Lowell from Frail Body, and we go in depth of what happened. Now recording this last night. This is coming out next week, but I just watched the season finale twice, and I still can't believe what I watched. I cried, I gasped, I yelled holy shit many times. And I know the internet is freaking out about this. They have every right to. If you're a Star Wars fan, you probably freaked out just as much as any of us. So here it is, season 2, The Mandalorian. Obviously, spoiler warning. Let's do this. Well, Nic, what is up, guys?
Hey, man.
How you guys doing today?
Here to talk about Star Wars.
Here to geek out, yeah.
Yeah, I love to hear that. So this story is always different for everyone. Obviously, there's been 4 decades of Star Wars at this point. So what got you guys into Star Wars?
I'll let you take that one first.
I mean, honestly, like, I just remember being like 4 or 5 years old, and it was like around Thanksgiving, and like it was just on like ABC, like A New Hope was just on, and my dad was like, "Oh, you have to watch this. You have to watch this." I was like, "I don't want to watch this Star Wars thing or whatever, you know." And then I sat down and I watched A New Hope, and like as soon as Vader just like boarded the Rebel cruiser, I was sold, man. I was like just completely into it, and like my life went from like being like a 3-year-old obsessed with dinosaurs to being like a 4-year-old obsessed with like becoming a Sith Lord, basically. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. My earliest memories of going to a theater, and I think that might be why it like had an impact on me, was because like I had that light bulb moment, when you're like 4 or 5 and you like realize like, oh wait, this is why we do this thing. It was like going to see the re-releases in theaters ahead of the prequels. And that was like the first time when I was a kid, and I was just like, oh, you go here to see like TV things, but they're like bigger, they're on a big screen, and that's what you do.
Right.
And it was Star Wars, so I was just like, oh shit, this is sick. Like this is so cool. And that was just like my first concept of like cinema was like just Star Wars. So
wow.
Yeah, so it was like just made a big impact right off the bat. But
that's so cool. It's so weird because I had the original trilogy, like the VHS box set that had the 3 movies.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I had it, to be honest. I don't know if I always liked nerdy stuff like Batman and Power Rangers and Spider-Man, X-Men and stuff when I was a kid. So I don't know if my parents just bought it because they're like, oh, this is, obviously a big nerd thing, and got it for me. And I even asked my mom, I was like, do you know why we had the Star Wars trilogy on VHS? And she was like, no. And I'm like, all right, I guess I really have no explanation why. I've just been around Star Wars my whole life. It's just there. I don't know. But that's sick. Because I don't remember. It was weird because now I'm such a big movie theater. Like I love going to the movie theaters. But when I was younger, we never went ever. I didn't start going until I was like a teenager when all of my friends would want to go. And then my brother ended up working at a movie theater, and I could just go to see any movie I want for free pretty much, unless it was like a midnight premiere.
That's awesome.
So I would just go to movies because I could just go to any movie I wanted for free. I even saw a bunch of terrible movies just because I could. But that was like well after all of the prequels and stuff were out. So like my biggest like theater Star Wars stuff is the newer ones, which is
okay for sure.
Which is weird, but I've always been like I've watched all the Star Wars movies on VHS like my whole childhood. It's just weird that I don't really have an answer of why they were there. They were just there always. Yeah. I don't know if I was a kid and like I want those or something, and my parents got them for me or what. I have no idea because I asked her and she was like, I don't know.
Yeah. See, my parents were like, they were like born again Christian like pacifists. So like I wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers and shit growing up.
Oh wow.
So they were very much like, we don't want you to have like knives or like toy guns and stuff like that. So like Star Wars was my little way to like be into like military things or like into like the things that, you know, you at, you know, 5 and into airplanes and stuff like that. It was like Star Wars was fine because they were just like, ah, it's fantasy violence. So it was like that was how I was like able to like play shooter games. Was like, well, it's not, you know, it's not like
not
Duke
real people.
Nukem, but it's yeah, I'm shooting stormtroopers, so it's fine.
What a weird line to draw
Yeah,
there. But
yeah,
I
but
mean, it works.
yeah, they would not buy me like shooter video games, but like they would buy me any Star Wars thing that I wanted. They're just like, no, it's fine that because it's just like a fantasy thing. So
All right. I mean,
It's all an allegory for Vietnam, but
yeah,
you don't
I
find
know,
that out
right?
till late.
I was gonna say it's very rooted in events that definitely happened in real
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
It's my favorite when people are like, don't bring politics into pop culture, and I was like, pop culture is framed on politics.
Dude,
Like,
trade
No,
negotiations are everything.
entirely. Yeah.
there was like a huge post when obviously this year has been crazy politically, and it was
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, say keep politics out of comics, and they list like everything from like, you know, Marvel and DC, and it's like all literally based on politics. And I'm like,
Oh
do you guys just
yeah.
not pay attention? Like what?
Yeah. It
Like
was
what?
like propaganda for kids. I mean, it was just I mean the first comics of I'm not a comic book nerd, but weren't the first ones basically just Superman beating up Nazis? I mean,
Captain America. Captain
or
America.
Captain
Was,
America.
Captain
not
America
Superman.
was literally made to sell like war bonds. Like
Yeah,
actually,
totally.
like actually
Yeah.
made to sell war bonds. But yeah,
Mhm.
one of the famous covers is him punching Hitler in the face, which they do. Well, they reenact it in the movie. It's a fake
Mhm.
Hitler. It's a fake Hitler. It's not the real Hitler.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like all rooted in that. You know, every idea comes from something that's already happened. You know,
Yeah.
in some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. So
Mhm.
obviously the Star Wars universe is insanely massive, and the Mandalorian has done the best job of connecting to actually everything ever involved in Star Wars. So
Yeah.
like, what's your guys' background now in Star Wars? Like, have you watched the animated series? Have you read the books? Have you read the comics? Have you played some of the video games? Like, where is your guys' at like level at with that kind of stuff?
We're like entirely opposite on this, which is like kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So
This is why I wanted to ask it, because I love hearing that, because I
Yeah.
love because obviously like Star Wars is kind of made for everyone, especially like the
Yeah.
Mandalorian. It's made for people who have never watched Star Wars, and it's made for people who have like engulfed everything in Star Wars. It's like for everyone. It's incredible how they can do stuff like that. So I love hearing like
Right,
where
yeah.
people are at with that kind of stuff.
So,
yeah.
so like for me, like I moved around a lot when I was younger. So like there were times where like I'd go a couple months and there was like no cable access. So
Right.
like the Clone Wars was just like not an option for me. Like I'd see episodes here and there, but I was never able to watch like the whole like series the way it was meant to be seen.
Right.
But like my high school, my middle school had like pretty good libraries for the size of the school we were going to, and they had like literally every Star Wars book.
Wow.
So like from like 6th grade on, I was just reading about like all the expanded universe stuff, and I took a huge interest in like the New Republic saga. So like, and then reading about like how all the Moffs were like infighting, like trying to like take control of like a new empire and
Right.
like all that stuff, and then like I don't know if you ever read like did you ever read the books?
No, I'll,
Okay.
I'll get into my how I'm kind of going into that from now,
Yeah.
after you guys tell your side, and then
Cool.
how I'm going with that kind of stuff.
And then like there was like a really long series that's basically called like the Yuzan Vong saga, and it's about like this alien like mega culture from like way past the Outer Rim, and they just like destroy everything they come in contact with, and it's about like the New Republic trying to keep that from them from like basically eating up their galaxy. And it's just like that always interested me so much because like it shows that like even the Empire wasn't like this big thing that everybody thought it was. There's always like something kind of lurking in the background that's coming that's like way worse.
Was that
Right.
Mass Effect plagiarism?
It was way pre Mass Effect. It was like
Yeah, I was
1996.
gonna
Well,
say.
it might not be way before Mass Effect, but it was
Similar
it was
concept,
like
yeah.
96 or so, 97 that those books came out, and then I found them in like 2005 or something.
Yeah.
And then I got really into like the Sith Wars, the Sith Jedi Wars stuff, like Darth Bane, Darth Rev, and all that stuff.
Oh, the
Knights of
Old
the
Republic stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So that's kind of me, I guess.
That's sick.
Yeah, I kind of came to it from all the video games. I
Okay.
mean, I saw all of I saw the original trilogy in theaters with the re-releases, and then I saw the prequels in theaters as well.
Yep.
And so I was like really into it at that point, and so I was just kind of primed for the 2000s, which was when like everything that you could make a Star Wars game about was made. And so
True.
I like started making a list of all the games that I played, and it's just most of them, I'll just say. So so if I wanted to talk about each one, I'd probably take up an hour, but
We could take an hour just on like Battlefront 2, probably. Honestly.
oh
What-
yeah,
what a game.
totally. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I haven't played that because I bought it before all of the cool stuff got released with it. So I
Okay.
bought it, played like a fighter thing that was
Mhm.
terrible and awful, and I was like, I'm gonna return this. This is terrible. But then like months later, they released all the cool shit, and I was like, well, fuck.
Yeah, I haven't played the newest one.
I mean, I was playing it in like 05, 06, I think. Or is that when it first came out? Somewhere around there?
Battle-
Maybe-
Oh
I think-
yeah, I meant Battlefront, the newest Battlefront. My bad.
Yeah. Because that was always like our like party. That was one of
Yeah.
our party games, like back in the
Oh,
days
wow.
of doing like Halo LAN parties. We would like do Battlefront 1. We would meet and do because they had those modes where it was like almost like an RTS game, which is like fucking brilliant, where you would like go and play like the normal thing, but like you would play the battles, but if you won the battles, then you would like advance and like capture that planet and capture resources from it, so then you could like make more armies to invade
Oh,
other
damn.
planets. So it took like
Yeah.
a third person shooter game and then added strategy to it. And so then when you
Wow.
take like
Oh, and then
8 teenage boys and we're just like, all right, let's do this like 50 battle campaign, and we would just sit for like 12 hours and like
Yeah.
see who could like make the best army, and we would have like
well,
teams
the thing
doing
that
it.
made
It
that
was
so
yeah.
interesting too is like in between the battles for the planets, there'd be space battles, and usually
Yeah.
if you're really good on the ground, you would
Oh.
not be good in the TIE fighter.
Hmm.
So like it
Right.
was just it was anybody's game.
Yeah.
It was so much
Damn.
fun.
That was great. I really loved the Rogue Squadron games because I didn't have a PC that could play like flight simulators when I was a little kid, so all I had was like
Right.
an N64. So like that was I don't know, that I'm really into airplanes, so or at least I was when I was a little kid, so that was like my only way to like get nothing and fly in a video game. So I
Right.
played that like probably more than any other game. And then
Did you play the latest one?
no, I haven't, but I might get a VR setup just for because just the idea of being able to like sit in a cockpit and look around and like see all
Yeah.
of how everything works is just that's what I've always wanted in a video game like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, like
might spring to do
Austin
it.
from Ghost Key posted a video of him playing it like that.
yeah,
And I was like, whoa. I was like, that is insane.
yeah. His video was what made me like, all right, I might drop however much I need for a VR setup for that. That's insane. But yeah, and then I got really what like made Star Wars become like a little bit of a life thing for me as a kid was Star Wars Galaxies. And I was like legitimately in a role playing clan and like just a part of like a 200 person organization playing on servers with thousands of people. It's kind of odd to talk about Galaxies because it's so far removed. It was a game that really
Wow.
kind of had its heyday in like 2003 to 2005. And a lot of people talk about it like, oh, it's World of Warcraft but Star Wars, but
Right.
it's entirely not. Because it's more like Second Life almost. Like you can own a piece of land, you can build a house.
Wow.
You don't just go be a Jedi. You can be like whatever else you wanted. I was a smuggler. I made and sold drugs. That was what I did in the Star Wars universe.
Holy shit.
I was a drug dealer, and I made sniper rifles and ranged weapons, and that was like my little thing. I didn't really care about being a Jedi, and I fit into my little guild doing my thing. And the universe was entirely player created, which was
Wow.
insane because it was like any gun that you would pick up, they would have things that would drop. But you know how in like World of Warcraft, you like go and do a quest and then you get a piece of armor for doing that
Yeah,
quest.
yeah.
If you wanted a gun, you would hire somebody to make you one. And then they would be like,
Wow.
okay, well, I need you to get these resources. And then they would need to do it at this certain location with like their equipment. It was all like everything that you would see in the universe was like, okay, somebody made that though. And so they had like the core things, like Coruscant was a city. You know, you could
Right.
go to Naboo and you could go and see the palace and things like that. But like 90% of the planets were like player cities. And so it was just this,
Oh.
it gave like the Star Wars universe like this huge depth because now all of a sudden it's not just like, all right, we're following Luke and Leia and like this very core group of people in what's
Right.
supposed to be this huge universe. Now they're just side characters. You run into them every once in a while, but most of the time you're fighting other people. You're doing other stuff with other people, other
Right.
races. You maybe see a Jedi every once in a while. Like when you see a Jedi, it's like, oh shit, there's going to be like 20 bounty hunters running after them in like the next 10 minutes. Like they can't be seen. It was just a very, it was a perfect game in my opinion.
Wow.
And it got me to just like really view that universe as more than just like a couple movies. And that's
Right.
what I love about The Mandalorian, because when they announce new movies, I was like, I don't want it to be about anything with Jedi. It doesn't need to be. Like, there is
Right.
such a huge universe. So now with what they're doing with like Boba Fett and with all of that series, and it's just like, yeah, there's a Jedi here and there, but like it makes them, it's written to make them actually feel as important as they're talked about in the movies, because we see them all over the place. But to an
Right.
average person in the galaxy, when you see a Jedi, it's like, what? Holy shit, that's a once in a lifetime thing. And that's something that the Mandalorian, I think, kind of brings in, where it's like when you do run into them, it's like, okay, pay attention. This is an important more person than this. Just like another kid running around that's, oh, it's a youngling with a lightsaber. It's like actually carries some weight to it. So yeah.
Yeah.
I rambled a lot, but
No,
I'm
dude.
very passionate about Star Wars Galaxies.
No, man, that's very, very cool. Yeah. So how I was always just the movies. I just watched the movies until the new trilogy started coming around, and I realized I knew more about Star Wars than I thought. I think it was because my fascination with like comic book stuff and starting to actually read comics kind of like made my brain think in different ways and like learn knowledge differently, where I just remembered more things than I thought I did. And there's definitely still some like planets or names of random people that I forget and don't remember. But
yeah,
it was funny
huge.
because my wife Sam, she is like a first generation American. Her mom came from Vietnam, and she almost like learned English watching the prequels, sort of, but she never really understood what was going on because she was so young. And
Wow, that's crazy.
So we like rewatched all of the movies at the beginning of quarantine, I think, because she didn't really remember the prequels at all. So we watched them and just like seeing her like do that, or having her explain, or having me. She was like, "Hey, explain to me like what like happened to lead up to Rise of Skywalker and stuff like that." And I was like, "Oh wow, I know way more than I thought I did." Because I was like, "Oh, I like Star Wars, but like there's people who like love Star Wars, and I'm not on that level, I guess." And then I started talking about it. I was like, "Oh wow, I guess I do know more Star Wars than I thought." And then Mandalorian came out, and it's just like you said, it was so cool to see the Star Wars world like through a completely different lens of, you know, in the Outer Rim. I mean, we've seen some of the Outer Rim and everything, but you know, like he doesn't know what Jedi are. He thinks Jedi are a myth and everything like that. And pretty much the finale of season 1 happened, and Moff Gideon gets out of the TIE fighter with a Darksaber. I was like, I don't know what the fuck that is. I was like, that's cool. I don't know what it is, but it's cool. And then I go on the internet and like everyone's like, oh fuck, Clone Wars, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh, cool. I was like, obviously I've heard of Clone Wars and Rebels. I've never watched them because I never thought they were like important to the story or whatever. Because obviously none of the characters show up in the main movies other than like the main people like Obi-Wan and Yoda and shit like that. So
Yeah.
I went back this year and I watched all of Clone Wars in the chronological order because for some reason the release order is not in the right chronological order of how it happens.
Yeah, they jump around.
And then I ended up watching Rebels because I was like, I want to learn more about like the Darksaber and whatever story this has to tell. I've heard obviously like amazing things about Ahsoka. Like I want to check this out for myself. So I did, and I watched every episode. I might have skipped a few, but I watched every episode of Clone Wars, which is a very big task. Anyone who's like, I want to watch Clone Wars, I'm like, just watch like the 20 episodes that they say because those are all the story-centric episodes, and then watch the last season, and you'll be fine. Because there is a whole lot of filler. Okay. But I'm like a weird completionist, and I just wanted to watch the whole thing. Whatever.
For sure. I understand that.
So I was watching it, and I was so shocked at all of like the Mandalorian lore that was involved in Clone Wars, and then you'll see a little bit more in Rebels too. I was just like, holy fuck, this is so cool. Because obviously the only thing you've seen before Mandalorian was really Jango Fett, and Jango's main role was being, you know, the donor for the clones. And then you see Boba Fett for like 5 minutes maybe in the original trilogy, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So like learning actually like the lore of Mandalore and, you know, seeing all the Death Watch stuff and shit like that, I was like, holy fuck, this is so sick. So once I finally finished that, I just went right into Rebels. And Rebels to me seriously has some of my favorite Star Wars moments of all time. And obviously before we get into talking about Mandalorian season 2, this is like a huge spoiler warning for anything in Mandalorian season 2. Obviously for listening to this, I'm sure you've probably watched it or seen on the internet what has happened. So I just want to throw it out there for people listening to this, be like, oh, you spoiled it, whatever, you know, the internet. But obviously I might spoil things in Clone Wars and Rebels, but again, you've probably seen or heard about it too anyway, if you're a Star Wars fan, if you haven't watched it. But Rebels, like the ending of Rebels, well, one of the episodes in the end of Rebels, I don't know if you guys have seen the shows, but there's some moments that rival the ending of the season finale of Mandalorian to me. That made me like flat out like weep because of the characters they built and the story they tell. It's just so well done. It's crazy to see how Filoni is like evolved, because obviously he's a producer on this, but he knows so much about Star Wars because he was literally taught by George Lucas in making the Clone Wars. So he is like, I don't think anyone knows more about Star Wars than Dave Filoni other than George Lucas. But he understands it. Every time they're like, oh, the Mandalorians, you know, they're enhancing the movies, and like Clone Wars enhances the prequels and stuff like that. And they're like, no, we're just adding to Star Wars. Like this is what George wants to, like, this is what George would do pretty much. We're just adding to Star Wars. And I love that kind of respect to people, because obviously there's huge like tension and arguments about like, you know, the sequel trilogy sucks and the prequels are terrible or whatever. I like all the Star Wars movies. When it really comes down to it, it's like a space opera with magic. So like, if you're really going to try and break it down, it's kind of silly. I can see why people don't like some things and likes other things. Like, whatever, that's fine. Everyone has their own opinions. Everyone has their different views. But feel like I just hate when people like totally shit on things that I don't really think are meant to be shit on. Obviously, things could have been done better. Obviously, the Mandalorian is showing that with a plan, things can be done in an insane and like huge way in the Star Wars world. But I just hate when people shit on stuff when it's not really needed to be shit on. But
I think the biggest thing that I took away from the Mandalorian is to not hold everything as like completely sacred from my childhood, and to be okay with things changing.
Right.
Because like at the end of season 2, obviously this is like kind of a big thing, but when the Mandalorian takes off his helmet and just baby Yoda, Grogu just like touches his cheek, that to me was symbolizing that like things don't have to be the way that he was told to never take off his helmet.
Right.
And like basically if he did that, he's not a Mandalorian. And I've always felt that if Star Wars isn't the way that Star Wars has always been for me, then it's not Star Wars. But that moment to me was kind of like, that was like my oh fuck moment, where like things can change and things can move ahead and things can move forward and still be what they are. And you just have to like move with it and be okay with it and accept it, because it's just the way it is.
Yeah, that is so well said. And they built to it the whole season. Everything with Cobb Vanth having Boba Fett's armor, to him realizing Boba Fett isn't really a Mandalorian, to Bo-Katan taking off their helmets, and they're like that. This is like one of the funniest moments to me, especially with watching Clone Wars and Rebels. So it's like me seeing Bo-Katan in live action I was like, oh fuck, this is sick. And like obviously they did it with the Cobb Vanth thing. They're like, you're not a Mandalorian. He's like, I'm not a Mandalorian. I found this armor, blah blah blah. And he's like, where'd you get that armor? And she's like, I was born on Mandalorian, motherfucker, pretty much to him. And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, that's hilarious. Like, I was born here. What the fuck do you mean? It was, but like you said, it's the whole season was about him progressing and him realizing that there are things more important than some belief system or what you were taught when you were a kid. You can learn and progress, and things do change over time. And even like that conversation he has with Bill Burr, his character, and they're like, what's the difference? Like New Republic, Empire, like really, what's the difference? He's like, we're all here, still getting shit on either way. Pretty
much. We all
just
like, fell into the side that we were born closest to.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That was a great conversation.
Yeah, it's been so cool to see Star Wars through so many different lenses. Seeing like them get through that whole fighting off the pirates and like everyone charging or like everyone cheering and clapping for them at the end, and then you have that crazy conversation with the officer and Bill Burr's character and shit like that. And it's just like, it's so crazy how they're going into these different things and everything. I just love how they've done a really good job at, now obviously they're bringing people stuff in that's very tied to the movies, but it's not to be like, oh, these are tied to the movies. It's more of like, hey, the story earned it, we made it here. It all does make sense, but we're gonna earn it along the way. And that, like, I think this show is incredible. I from watching season 1, I never thought season 2 would ever be anything like this. This season completely blew me out of the water. Like every episode, I'm like, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, this is insane.
It is the best Star Wars thing to come out like in my lifetime, honestly. In my opinion.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more of the I guess I'm a little old and jaded because I really did not like the newest trilogy, and I was upset. I'm kind of one of those stereotypical fanboys, I guess, that wasn't super about what they tried to do. I thought the first movie was okay. I was fine with it. The second movie straight up made me mad.
It made a lot of people mad.
Yeah, and it is what it is. And honestly, I still need to watch the last one because I was just so upset by it. But the Mandalorian and the standalone films,
Rogue One's amazing too.
I love
Rogue
One.
Rogue One is sick.
Yeah, I really liked Rogue One, and I liked that was sort of coming from my perspective, being somebody that was like very much obsessed with this stuff for a very big chunk of my life.
Right.
When I saw like Rogue One, it was like one of the first times where I was just like, thank you. This is a war. Like there's supposed to be like some tension here. It's
right.
There's like it felt like they were finally like delivering some of that. And then I genuinely liked Solo too. I don't really understand why people shit on that movie so much. I thought it was fine. I think that anybody trying to impersonate Harrison Ford is going to fail. Like you're just not going to succeed at that. So like, he did as best as he could, and I think that movie's all right. And The Mandalorian, I think, is perfect. I love this series, and that's coming from somebody that hasn't even watched the last of the newest trilogy. I really did not like the new trilogy, but The Mandalorian is I think the best piece of Star Wars media to come out, and I would say at least since some of the video games in the 2000s. I mean,
yeah, a lot of like friends I have that are older that were kind of around, they weren't really born when the original trilogy came out, or maybe they were very, very young, but those type of people are like, yeah, this is the best thing since the original trilogy, like straight up. Like that's actually like canon, I guess, because a lot of those games aren't canon anymore. But I understand, like I know like when they made like the books non-canon and stuff like that, a lot of people got mad, but now it's making sense because they're filling in those gaps with shows and
Yeah.
video
Yeah.
games or whatever. So it's like you can't retcon everything. You have to redo it. So making all that stuff, it's, you know, and it's still there. It's like comics, you know, nothing in comics
Yeah.
is anything like the movies. It's just the same characters. It's just a different run, you know. It's like, that's how I like looking at it. It's like, and that's what it's
Yeah.
like. All of this stuff makes me want to go back because Thrawn is such a big part of Rebels. I want to read the Thrawn trilogy books because he is like, and obviously we'll probably talk about it, but he's definitely coming into one of these shows, or maybe some crossover show that's going to end up happening with some of the new shows all tied together. But he is such an insane villain. And
Dude, in the books too, he was like one of the first like major villains after like Palpatine that I found out about that I just like was completely obsessed with. Like the stuff that he did in the books. I haven't watched Clone Wars, or sorry, the other animated series, but what he did in the books was so fucking crazy that when Ahsoka just mentioned his name in The Mandalorian, I got goosebumps.
Yeah, so I'm like, I finished Rebels like 2 weeks before The Mandalorian came out. So I like knew Ahsoka was coming. Like obviously, like the rumors leaked and stuff, and it was funny because like all these rumors are leaking about everything, and I was like, if this shit is leaking, I was like, there's gonna be something fucking insane that happens in the season that no one sees coming, and obviously that did happen. But yeah, as soon as you said Thrawn, because basically at the end of Rebels, there's this huge fight with Thrawn and the rebels, and Ezra ends up like summoning these space whales that can travel in hyperspeed, and they're like force sensitive. So they're in this crazy fight. Dude, it's fucking nuts. Like the weird force shit that Dave Filoni does in Clone War, there's like really weird force episodes. There's like one where it's kind of Yoda figuring out how to do like force ghost shit with Qui-Gon. There's this whole episode where they go to this planet, and it's this like force planet, and they're basically saying like Anakin is the chosen one, and he has to like, it's fucking crazy. It's so like, it's so weird, but it's so cool. And so he summons these space whales, and him and Thrawn are like intertwined in Thrawn's ship. And basically the space whales go into hyperspeed somewhere, and that's how he saves them. So Thrawn and Ezra go somewhere that we have no idea where. So like her saying Thrawn is pretty much saying Ezra is still alive somewhere. They're likely together somewhere. So like Ezra's been trapped by Thrawn for like almost like over a decade now, I think, at this point, because the end of that show like leads right up to A New Hope pretty much. It's like the forming of the rebellion pretty much is like all of Rebels.
Okay.
And,
yeah, I need to watch that.
Dude, it is. There's definitely some filler episodes too in that, but it is so fucking good. There's also this moment with when Ahsoka meets Vader, and obviously Anakin, like Ahsoka was Anakin's Padawan. So they meet each other, and that moment is so fucking insane and so cool. And you're led to believe that Ahsoka dies because they leave her and this planet like implodes with both of them. Obviously Vader lives. We know Vader lives. And then Ezra, in another weird Force episode, they go to this Jedi temple, and he goes into this place. It's called like the World Between Worlds, and there's this weird like it just looks like space almost. And there's these pathways, and there's this owl called Moira that you actually see in the Ahsoka episode of Mandalorian in the background. There's like this owl, and it's like a Force guardian kind of thing. And you see this owl in front of this pathway. And Ezra goes into that moment with Vader and like pulls Ahsoka out and like saves Ahsoka's life. Super fucking weird. And that's how like Ahsoka lives. And then there's like like almost like a stinger. It's like an epilogue to Rebels, and it happens after the Battle of Endor. So right after Return of the Jedi, and it's pretty much saying like, oh, this person fought, like a bunch of these people fought in the war and like fought in the Battle of Endor and stuff like that. And then it shows, so Sabine is the reason that Bo-Katan had the Darksaber. She gives the Darksaber to Bo-Katan because she finds it, because Maul gets it in the end of Clone Wars by defeating the Mandalorian when they siege Mandalore. It's pretty much like the same group that found Din Djarin, but it's obviously years later, called Death Watch. And they're like crazy, super nuts, like Mandalorian pretty much. And So Sabine gives it to them, and then Sabine's on Ezra's home planet, just like waiting, hoping he shows up. And then you see Ahsoka come, and it's pretty much like saying like, "Hey, we're gonna go find Ezra." And then after the Ahsoka episode of The Mandalorian came out, Dave Filoni goes, "Oh, hey, this could happen before that scene in Rebels. I'm not going to confirm or deny it, but this could happen." And so like her saying Thrawn is like, "Hey," because pretty much as soon as you said Thrawn, obviously you could see it was like a one-off episode, and I was like, an Ahsoka series has to be coming. It has to be coming because it's obviously they're not going to. Those two stories aren't going to merge. They're completely different paths there. So as soon as that happened, and then that happened, I was like, oh my god! I was like, the Ahsoka series is just going to be a live-action sequel to Rebels. It has to be. It's it's going to be them trying to find Ezra and Thrawn, and whatever happens after that happens. But I just rambled on about Rebels for probably way too long. But
it's all good. Yeah.
Honestly, when you were talking about Moira the Owl and like that space pathway thing, it just screamed like Twin Peaks to me. I don't know if you ever watched that, but that's like that's like my other fandom, and there's like a lot of there's a lot of things about owls and like basically interdimensional pathways where people talk to each other but they're not actually in the same room. So I'm wondering if that's like a Twin Peaks reference, which if it is,
it could be.
I'm going crazy thinking about it.
Crossover. Yeah,
that would be a wild comparison, but it's definitely possible because Rebels isn't like that old. It's only a few years old. It ended a few years ago.
Yeah,
so it's possible.
That's such a pop culture staple too.
I just had to bring that up because it's crazy.
No, that's that's really cool. Actually, it's very, very cool. So go ahead.
I was gonna bring up one thing. I was gonna ask you if you watched, because whenever people bring up the Clone Wars, usually I know like 90% of the time people are talking about like the series from like 2008 to 2012 or something like that.
Yeah.
But the Clone Wars for me was the the micro shorts in between episodes on Cartoon Network.
The guy from Samurai Jack, right?
Yeah. The 25 episodes or so that were like 5 minutes long or less, that was what I always thought of as the Clone Wars. So whenever people tried to talk about the Clone Wars, I would just get really confused because I had no idea that they like took that and expanded it into an actual show, because I don't even think Ahsoka was in it at all.
I don't think so.
In the micros. And so like people would bring up like, oh yeah, like this Jedi's coming back from those micros, and I was like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? And I like even watched this series of the new series of The Mandalorian, saw her, and I was like, oh, who the hell is that? There's another Jedi. And for a moment I was like, man, they're just like throwing stuff in, because I feel like Star Wars definitely suffers from the like obviously like things being thrown in that might not be canon, or like it's whereas like the Tolkien universe is like, if you look at Tolkien, like everything is very like, all right, this is how the things are. And Star Wars is so much of like, all right, here's this thing, and then this is this thing that this person added to it, and then this other person over here added this. And so I feel like sometimes that shit is what will like annoy me with some of the newer stuff. So like for a half a second I was like, okay, who the hell is this? And then reading back I was just like, oh wow, that's impressive, that's cool that they did that. Like it just seems like every time that I was like almost had my radar out for like, okay, where's something that I can be like maybe a little critical of in this, it was like, oh no, that makes sense. Like
yeah, I guess really the only like
it's airtight. I mean, that series is really good.
Yeah, and like Filoni, who is the executive producer on Mandalorian, like he did all the animated stuff. So he's like, it's like he's just taking all the stuff he did for almost a decade and just bringing it to live action, which must be amazing for him, honestly, to be able to like bring it back. And even though that stuff is canon and like totally matters to everything, but obviously not a lot of people have watched it. And everything like that. So it's super cool to see those people come to live action and people will be like, oh, this character is super cool. Like, I can't wait. Even if they watch like a video on YouTube being like, who is Ahsoka Tano? Like, that's still cool. Like, you don't have to go back and watch all this stuff. That's why it's like I went in that crazy Rebels rant, because I love like I just fell in love with those series that I'm so excited to like talk about it and see how it's tying into The Mandalorian and what else it'll tie into in the future. I'm just so excited to people to like find these characters and be like, oh, this character's cool. I want to learn more about it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just, and also like with the, I think, not jumping too far ahead, but one of my favorite moments in the newest series was down towards the, well, maybe I'll save this for the last scene. I'll save this for the last scene. When we talk about the last scene, there's something that ties into this, but I'll leave it for that. But yeah,
Fair
basically enough. Just the fact that the Star Wars universe has always existed to like push the narrative of like the Jedi or the Sith or these people, and so then to see the Mandalorian in just kind of expanding it to just like, yeah, there's also other people, and there's like they're equally as important in all these wild plot lines, you know.
Yeah.
There's also like multiple sides to everybody. Like nobody's completely evil except Palpatine, and nobody is like completely good because like
Right.
And that's what they explore in like the Old Republic is like that's for me what I was drawing comparisons to with the Mandalorian or drawing references to was like the Mandalorian wars that they talk about in the Old Republic games because all of that stuff was like I couldn't draw from the Clone Wars stuff because I haven't watched it, but like all of the references to the old Jedi versus Mandalorian wars, I was like, wow, they're like actually doing, but they wouldn't make it like these crazy conversations that go too in depth. It would just be like these tiny bits of what I would call like sensible fan service, where they like drop a little thing where it's like, all right, you understand this, but also somebody who doesn't know what's going on knows enough information without, you know, having to turn their brain off and be like, all right, this is nerd shit, I don't get it, you know.
Yeah, it's weird because there was this whole conversation with the sequel trilogy. You talked about how you weren't a big fan of it. I enjoyed them. I thought some of the characters in it were some of the best Star Wars characters to kind of come out. Okay. Now it's weird because the Mandalorian is kind of changing my opinion on them. Not like I hate them, but it's like if someone was like, "Hey, let's watch some Star Wars stuff," I'd be like, "I'd rather watch the Mandalorian" or something like that rather than a lot of the movies, which is fine. I still enjoy them. I still enjoy like every Star Wars movie. The only one that's kind of hard to get through for me is Attack of the Clone Zones, but the ending is pretty cool. But the beginning and the end of it, it's pretty rough. But but it's just so hard to like compare the two almost now. You know, it's like you said, like everything's been so focused on Jedi, everything's been so focused on Skywalker or Palpatine or both at the same time. And the sequel trilogy really, I think the biggest fault was they didn't go, hey, here's the plan for all three movies. We're going to do this. Obviously, you have your creative freedom with it, but these things need to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously with this series, it's been planned from the jump. There's no way this stuff was not planned from just the start. There's no way. You can't just like make this shit up as you go. And the way they tie things in, like how you were saying, it's almost like sensible fan service where it's like, here's some snippets of stuff, but like if you don't understand it, it's not like, what the fuck are you talking about, you know? So it's like all of this stuff is very, very deliberate, you know. And it's if they could have just done that in the sequel trilogy, I think people would have enjoyed them a lot better. You know, it's like they kind of tied back, like they're doing a better job explaining stuff that happened in the sequel trilogy in this show better than they did in the sequel trilogy.
Well, totally.
I feel like after the Mandalorian is done, I feel like I'll go back and watch the sequel trilogy and I'll enjoy it more.
Yeah.
Because the thing that bothered me about the sequel trilogy is that like at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Empire is defeated, like good won over evil, and then you know the next chronological movie to come out is like, oh, actually all of that was bullshit. And like the Empire is actually way stronger than it ever was before. Yeah. Like there just wasn't a good enough explanation as to how that happened.
Yeah.
In the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, I mean it would be like if somebody, well, I'll just go back to like Tolkien and they were just like, oh yeah, by the way, there's another ring, and you know, it would just be like, so like, so it's just it's the little things like that like when I go back and because I was reading through some of the timeline today because my entire life has just been politics recently. So I was like, fuck, what is the Star Wars stories even?
Yeah.
And I was looking back through it and like, I'm not going to take up too much time explaining, but I sought out some clarification over like all of that stuff because it's not really given in the movies. But then like I went back through Wikipedia and was looking at like, oh, who is Snoke, and like what is the First Order, what is this supposed to be? And it's like when you like read back through some of the information, it's like, okay, well, this does sit in canon. You just shoved it in though. You didn't like you
they
didn't
basically
place
made
it in canon. You shoved it in canon.
Yeah, they basically made a bunch of comics that fill in gaps that were in the movies, 100%.
Yeah, and so like now reading back, it's like, okay, I think I will watch the last movie because now I feel like now that I understand the context of it, where and
the last movie is like cool. It's just it's so weird. It's like I circling back to Marvel. It's like Endgame did such a good job of culminating this like few phases of the Marvel universe, and then Rise of Skywalker came out after that, and it just did not land as much as that. It was almost like we talk about like fan service. So fan service can be good, it can be bad, it can be forced, and it can be earned.
Yeah.
And Endgame, almost every fan service moment is like definitely earned. Like it was hinted 20 movies ago, it was hinted 10 movies ago, it was hinted earlier in the movie, whatever. Like a lot of it is earned. And a lot of Rise of Skywalker, some of that stuff is earned, and then a lot of stuff is like, okay, you just put that in to be like, look at what we did kind of things. Which is fine, but it's just like some of the parts are really cool in that movie, and then other parts are like, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And that's like honestly what I think about the problem with the new trilogy. I think is kind of stuff like that, because there are some insane set pieces that are some of the coolest things that have ever happened in the Star Wars universe, like the self-sacrifice on the ship and everything, and like all that. And then there's things like the floating Leia and whatnot, where it's just like, oh my gosh. But yeah.
I'm a big The Last Jedi defender, but I know having discussions about The Last Jedi is very pointless. It's like talking about politics or religion with people who have different sides. It's just pointless.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a pointless conversation.
It's fine. I understand that I'm the crotchety old man in this situation. But
believe me, one of my best friends hates that movie. Like we are the polar opposite ends of that movie. So it's I have no, like I said, people can have different opinions. That's totally fine. I just hate when people shit on stuff to shit on it. But kind of like what you said with Solo. It's like that movie was fine.
Yeah, I think that I thought that movie was all right. And like I guess when what you were bringing up earlier about how like the way that they kind of like tactfully do stuff in The Mandalorian, whereas like shit just happens in the new trilogies, it kind of feels like. And in The Mandalorian, like you were saying, they contextualize a lot of the Star Wars universe in a manner that like people that aren't obsessed with it. So like a perfect example is like when Boba Fett landed, that's probably one of my favorite moments of the new series is just because like so I really like all the ships and stuff like that. So like Slave One is, I mean, yes, it's Boba Fett's ship, of course, but like that's just it's another just Corellian cruiser. Like it's a Corellian transport ship.
Right.
And so like when that thing lands, they do enough of the fan service of like putting some of those things in that for like, to anybody else who might be more jaded than me, they're like, of course it's Boba Fett. But for me, that's like, oh, they're paying attention to like using stuff that has been referenced.
Right.
I don't know if that's Boba Fett. That could be somebody else. That would be very much like what they would do, is just like, here's this thing, here's an X-Wing, doesn't necessarily have to have anybody important in it.
It was the same thing with X-Wing. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. And wow, like that scene, like that, like totally paralleled, like when Luke just did that to those Dark Troopers, it brought me back to Rogue One when Vader like, locked those rebels.
Yep.
And so getting to see like the way they did it too, the CGI Luke, like whatever you want to say about it, I thought that was done really tastefully.
Same.
I mean, obviously it's not perfect, but it's a new technology. It's never gonna be 100%. But the way they did the action scenes where his hood is up, and like, you just saw it on the screen of the ship, like that was done so well.
Exactly what you said with the X-Wing. When the X-Wing pulls up and Cara Dune's like, "Oh, one X-Wing, great, we're saved." Right. I was like, they're doing
Red 5, motherfucker.
They were doing, because obviously when they did the Seeing Stone thing and Ahsoka Tano mentioned maybe a Jedi will come up, but there's not many left. Everyone's like, who could the Jedi be? Who could it be? Can it be Ezra? To me, everyone was like, it's Ezra. It's definitely Ezra. But to me, I was like, Ezra's not coming until this Ahsoka series that I thought was coming and then got confirmed by the Disney investor call. I was like, Ezra's going to be different. For all intents and purposes, for all we know, he's with Thrawn somewhere that we have no fucking idea. So I was like, as much as I would want it to be Ezra, I don't think it's Ezra. And then a lot of people were like, oh, it could be Cal Kestis from Fallen Order. And I was like, that'd be cool. I played that video game. It was super sick. That would be pretty wild. But at the same time, how many people play the video game? I'm sure a lot. But people would be like, who the fuck is that? The craziest theory, even crazier than Luke, because I heard Luke and I was like, man, that'd be pretty wild. But them kind of saying like, hey, we're kind of stepping away from Skywalker stuff. I was like, there's no way they do Luke. Not saying that like I don't want. I guess for a moment I was like, I don't know if I want Luke, just because like how we said, this is such like removed from everything else. It like expanded the universe insanely. But the more I thought about it, the craziest theory though, before I get into the Luke stuff, was Mace Windu could be the one. That Mace Windu lived from episode 3 and then you come back. Because here is my theory of Star Wars. If you fall, you're not dead.
Yeah.
It's happened so many times.
Yeah,
I mean, fall, they come back.
Yeah.
Biggest rule of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So someone said Mace Windu, and I'm like, that would be fucking crazy. It could happen.
Yeah.
And then I started watching, like, I watch a bunch of like breakdown videos and like Easter egg videos to see like references and stuff like that, stuff I missed, to be like, oh wow, that's really cool. It's so amazing they put that in there. Stuff that flies way the fuck over my head because I'm just a human, and then like usually I'm just freaking out during when shit's happening. But there's like everyone's talking about like, oh, Luke would make sense, and then they were trying to talk like there's like this whole thing in Battlefront 2, and there's this whole comic run in between his time of like Revenge of the Jedi and then starting that new order the new Jedi Order that we see in like The Last Jedi. And pretty much like his whole journey was him searching for Sith and Jedi like relics and learning more about both sides. So everyone's like, it would make the most sense for it to be Luke, because no one would be more in touch with, you know, the Force, or maybe even going to Tython, and that's how he finds Ach-2, where he's at in Last Jedi, through all this research and everything. Because Ezra wasn't really a fully fledged Jedi. He was trained by someone who I don't even think became a Jedi Master. Cal Kestis, his master was killed when he was like a kid, and he kind of learns. He's still Force sensitive and like has a lightsaber and stuff, and learns more in the journey of the game. But he's not like I mean, there is no Jedi Masters after that. You know what I mean? Like the Jedi Order is fucking done. So I was like, who would really? He does like a bunch of meditating and stuff, but like, so I guess he would make sense. But at the same time, it's like, who makes more sense at that time period than Luke? Like no one. Even after I watched this like 10-minute video saying like Luke is the most obvious answer, I was like, I don't think that's gonna happen. And then you see the X-Wing come up, and you're like, are they doing this? They might be doing this. And then you see the green lightsaber, and you're like, oh fuck. And then you see the black glove, and then that's when I was like, holy fuck, they're doing it. Holy shit. You know, like I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is crazy that I'm watching this right now. On top of that, the finale was already insane anyway. Like everything up to it was just crazy. Like Boba Fett talking with Bo-Katan and Casca Reeves about like, you know, like, oh, you're a clone. It's like, this was my father's armor. It's like, don't you mean your donor? And shit like that. And him calling her a princess and shit like that. Like just seeing that stuff, I was like, and that was like right in the beginning. I was like, this episode is nuts. Like, this is so crazy. And then to top it off with the fucking Luke shit. And again, like us talking about how this show has been done such a good job of like filling in the blanks of being like, oh yeah, you know, the Empire's defeated, and then in the sequel trilogy, oh, the First Order's here, and then we're seeing that like the New Republic is very dumb and oblivious to a lot of shit that's going on, and maybe too harsh. There was a video, one of the breakdown videos, like when she was going through the prison registry, people were like got like 50 years in prison for like falsifying credits and shit like that. So it's like people are getting arrested for like no reason and shit like that too. So it's like, obviously this shit is flawed and stuff like that. And they're showing why the First Order. And then throughout the season, I think they've said order twice, maybe by two Imperial officers, being like, we're bringing back order, obviously hinting at the First Order. And when we saw the weird clone things, and they were talking about M count with Grogu's blood, everyone's like, oh, is that what leads to Snoke? Is that what leads to Palpatine coming back? And they don't directly confirm it, but him saying like his blood has special properties that's going to lead to order is pretty much being like, hey, this is what's going to create that, which is like super cool, also depressing, because it's pretty much saying that Grogu is the reason Palpatine came back.
I think like one of my favorite parts of The Mandalorian was when the Imperial officer was talking to Bill Burr's character, and he said people don't want freedom, they want order.
Yeah.
Like that. I like had to pause it, and I was like, damn, like they're this is like how every Trump supporter is like thinks right now.
Yes.
Not to get into like politics right now, but like
I'm fine with it.
there are people that like think that way, and that's like really fucked up.
And that very much parallels the guy who holds the cloning engineer hostage on the ship. You know, he's saying, you know, him being like, I was on the Death Star. He's like, millions of us dying was all worth it to see you terrorists die. You know what I mean? And it's like people fighting for freedom are terrorists. You know what I mean? It's very, very topical for shit that's going on right now, for sure.
Until that scene, you had never really seen like that side of like any Empire either. Like it was just like, damn, Vader's fucking evil. But that dude flying that transport obviously thought he was on the right side of it.
Yeah. And I never thought of like so many people dying on the other side until that moment.
Yeah.
You know, you never think of that, of like 2 Death Stars getting blown up and how many people died during those explosions. And that's what I like about this too, is it's like obviously death and stakes give weight to storytelling and shows and shit like that and movies. So them explaining stuff like that just gives more depth and meaning and, you know, texture to everything that's going on. It's like you guys were saying, like, you know, maybe I'll watch the sequel trilogy after all these shows, and I'll probably add so much more because it'll fill in so many gaps of like, why is this happening? What is this happening? Like, oh, like I know the knowledge because they gave it to me in something else. And the Clone Wars series kind of does that with the prequels too. It definitely elevates it to a higher level because of the stuff they put in the middle. But it's is there any other favorite moments you guys have from this season? Because there's probably a lot.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we're talking about that last scene, the one line,
we can talk about it.
Yeah, the one line that or I guess what was interesting was to me personally was because of everything with KOTOR and because of like knowing a little bit more of the Mandalorian versus Jedi stuff, like way back. What I really liked was that when the X-Wing pulls up and a Jedi comes out, you know, to everybody else who's like the viewing audience, we're all like, oh, cool, that's great. But to the Mandalorians, they're like, well, this shit just got worse. Now there's a Jedi. Like, this isn't good. What are you talking about? Like, we're not saved. Like, they were the ones that massacred. So it's like really cool because they don't break from that. They do the fan service of putting the Jedi in, but the characters react the opposite of the audience. They see the Jedi and they go, God damn it.
Yeah, even when
it's not a savior, that's their enemy.
Even when Mando's like open the doors and Fennec's like, are you insane? You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and it's just like that really was like, okay, cool. Like that's how you do the fan service, where you put the thing in there that makes, you know, you get the little serotonin rush, but you keep the characters in the context of their universe.
Right.
And just little things like when I was going to bring up with Boba Fett, the way that they explain so much of the background without beating you over the head with it, that makes it fun for us that have been obsessed with this shit forever and know the backstory of everybody. But then for somebody like my girlfriend Liz, who was sitting there and watching Boba Fett come out, and she's like, so wait, who's who? I don't understand this. And then And then I was like, just wait, they'll probably explain it. And then like 5 seconds of dialogue of him just like pulling open the schematics of his suit. I was
Yeah.
like, well, there you go. Now you understand Boba Fett. He just explained Jango Fett, the Clone Wars, everything right there. Just 5 seconds of dialogue. Doesn't have to be anything crazy.
Mhm.
And then Liz turned to me and she was like, oh, okay, I get it. And it's
So-
like, yeah, that's somebody who doesn't know like really much about Star Wars. And she was able to understand that right there. You know, that's how you do it.
I've got to say too, like again, back to that episode. Like I remember watching Empire when I was like 4 or 5 on ABC with my dad, and like from that moment on, just seeing Boba Fett for like 5 minutes in that film, I knew that he was like the most badass character, even though he didn't really do much.
Do anything?
He was
Yeah.
just the most
Yeah.
badass character. And so when the Mandalorian got announced, 5-year-old me was like, "Oh my god, like Boba's getting a spinoff, like this is gonna be crazy."
Yeah.
And then to have it not be Boba Fett was like a little disappointing, but I stuck with it anyways, and it was still
Yeah.
great.
Mhm.
And then seeing Slave One fly in, like, oh my god, crazy, right? But like when all those stormtroopers were like overrunning them, and he just comes out in the suit and just kills like 80 of them by himself,
Yeah.
like that was like the moment that like everyone who collected Boba Fett action figures was like waiting for.
Yeah.
It's the moment they all rejoice. They're like finally redeemed.
Yeah.
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 Like that like I got goosebumps. Like
Yeah, dude,
just, like it was so well done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so great. I guess like the knee cannons he used, they've
Yeah.
only been shown in like a visual dictionary that he just has knee cannons. Like that's how
Yeah.
in depth these motherfuckers think of shit in Star Wars level. It's crazy. Like
Yeah. There was one other moment. I guess my favorite thing from season 2, and this goes back to Star Wars Galaxies. And I feel like the only people that would probably recognize why this is such a weird fan servicey thing is the people that played Galaxies. But the Crate Dragon episode,
oh, yep.
because that was in the Star Wars universe. In Galaxies, it would take you a couple months to become a Jedi. And one of the things that you would end up having to do is to make your lightsaber, or for other components, you would have to kill a crate dragon.
Wow.
And that was like probably took 40 people or so, maybe 20 to 40 people to like do it. It was like a World of Warcraft raid sort of thing.
Wow.
And so to see that like visualized, and not even just that, but the tactics that they use were sort of like MMO tactics of
Right.
what's called kiting. So when I saw like the guy, because that's what you would have to do. My job in our guild was I would lay proximity mines and do like all this commando stuff. And so we would have somebody who is stronger do what's called kiting, where you basically shoot at the crate dragon and then run to the explosives to do damage. And so when they did that in the series, you know, Liz is sitting there and she's like, oh, this is cool. And I'm like in tears. I'm like, they're kiting a crate dragon. They're literally doing what my Friday night every single week for like all of middle school was. I was like, that dude's fucking kiting a crate dragon. He literally did that. Like that. So that was just one of those moments where I was just like happy tears.
God.
Like, holy shit. I never thought I would see this in like 4K, like, you know, live action. Like it's just.
So
yeah, I had no idea about, like, I just knew it was from like video games, and I think like a book or two or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I have no idea what this is, but it's cool. It ate a Sarlacc bit. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
There's like little stuff in that episode specifically that was really cool. I grew up the street from like a comic book store, so they had like the collectible card game or whatever of Star Wars.
Oh, wow.
Yesterday.
Yeah, and they would go into like crazy depth into like just background characters you see in the movies.
Right.
And one of the cards I remembered having was like the bartender on Mos Eisley was this alien species called a Weequay. And the bartender in that episode was a Weequay, and I was like, oh yeah, that's crazy.
They just call him. That's like one of the weirdest thing about Mandalorian is that they just call people by their race.
Yeah.
Like they don't have, like, some of them don't have names. They just call them by their race, which is like pretty racist. Like if you really think about it, you know what I mean? Like even calling Mandalorian like Mando, I mean, I guess it's kind of the same, but it's just it's wild how they do that, because it's like even the blue guy, that who's from the first episode, the one
yeah.
that comes back. Like they call him by his, I can't remember his race off the top of my head, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
They just call him by his race too, and you're just like, oh, okay, I guess, cool.
Yeah, that's like, yeah. I mean, it gives it so much more depth, and that's like, I don't know. I think like because of the I don't know, the constraints of like the earlier movies and them developing them on that sort of a budget, and they did what they could, but like now
Right.
they've actually got all of this other backstory that they're building on. It's kind of interesting because you it gives it more depth when you like realize like, oh, there's just all these races of living things, and like they can't all communicate with each other, and sometimes like you physically can't talk to this thing,
Right.
and you just gotta get okay.
You know what though? There was one thing in the Mandalorian that I kind of hated, and it was that episode with I didn't hate it, but it was just like it kind of seemed lazy to me. It was like the Frog Lady episode, because there was like the ant alien, which was also in the Mos Eisley Cantina, so that was cool. But like, and then the villain, or like the thing that was trying to kill him, was just a giant spider. So it's just like they just gave up on like trying to come up with something creative for that episode, and we're just like, fuck it, everyone's afraid of spiders. Like
It's like
Yeah,
a
I mean,
little, it's a little bit of a tie-in to Rebels, because that same spider's in Rebels. It's kind of like not like a big deal. But
is it? Okay.
Yeah, where they have their base. There's like a bunch of these spiders, and they have to like use these like proximity things. They're not like mines, but they like give off this frequency that like keeps the spiders away.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm dumb then.
No,
like
you just gotta watch Rebels.
You would literally have to have watched it to understand. And I think they might be the same spiders maybe in Fallen Order, but you kind of just kill them like a fucking savage. So I don't really think that's a real tie. But I am pretty positive they're the same spiders from Rebels, which is weird because it's kind of like a desert planet in Rebels, and then they're on this ice planet. So these spiders can just live anywhere, I guess, which is the biggest thing with that episode, which is hilarious, which is crazy, because obviously that one was kind of like the quote unquote most hated or the filler episode of the season or whatever.
Yeah.
It set up the Republic people. It did kind of like set up this whole thing of like, he's obviously will do anything to protect the kid. And obviously it's like a big build up to the Razor Crest eventually getting blown up after getting fixed. But which was, did not believe they did that. I could like the biggest thing with this show that I'll give them the most credit for, even though obviously we're giving them a ton of credit through all of this, but they kept Baby Yoda a secret, which is insane. And like the amount of merchandising money they like lost on that is insane. And they did it for the sake of the story, which is awesome. Like, good for them.
Yeah, definitely.
And then like the Razor Crest obviously is like, everyone loves the Razor Crest now. You know what I mean? It's like the new Millennium Falcon almost. Not to that extent, but you know what I mean? It's like it's like the new age Millennium Falcon. And they fucking blow it up. Like, people buy Lego sets and toy sets of this shit, and they blew it up. That is so fucking awesome.
No, definitely.
Crazy, because that like shows loss in a way that they never show like
the
character. Like, imagine if the Millennium Falcon got blown up.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's why I was talking about earlier. Like, these stakes, like, even though it's a ship, it's like a very important part of the show. And like Mando's like identity and shit. So it's like, even the fact of Luke taking Grogu, like, that is crazy. Like, is he going to show up in season 3? I don't know. Maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
because they are signed on for another season, aren't they? Another 2, I think, right?
It's
for sure
4.
But I'm wondering if they're just gonna do it as like a Boba Fett thing, because like where do they go with the Mando now?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, was maybe they might have subverted everything and just been like, hey, this is all prequel to the Boba Fett story. That might just be.
There's been a lot of
brilliant then.
A lot of theories on that, because in the investors call they said, hey, season 3 of The Mandalorian is coming December, like on Christmas. And they're supposed to be filming like next month of season 3. And then obviously the end credit scene of Boba Fett going back to Tatooine and taking over Jabba's palace and sitting on the throne. And they say the Book of Boba Fett, December 2021. They haven't really. There's been some, like, Deadline has said, hey, this is a separate thing. Mandalorian season 3 is still happening, but this is going to be its own thing. They haven't really said, like, oh, is it going to be a miniseries? Is it going to be a movie? Like, what's it going to be? Because, like, the Obi-Wan thing is like a six episode miniseries. Yeah. So it's like, it could be something like that leads right into Mandalorian season 3, or what? They haven't really. I've only seen that one article so far saying, like, hey, because that's what a lot of people thought. Like even like Sam was like, "Oh, is season 3 like Boba Fett?" Because like he's not really a Mandalorian, but he's in Mandalorian armor. You know, like season 3 could just be Boba Fett. But it seems like they are going to be separate things. To me, because at first I was like, "What is season 3 going to be?" And then I was like thinking about it, and I think it could be the whole them try like Din Djarin, Bo-Katan, them going to try and retake Mandalore with. This is the interesting part, because like a lot of people have had a big fuss about this, because they bring up the line saying, no, you can't just give the Darksaber to her. She has to defeat you in combat. So in Rebels, Sabine, like I think I talked about this a little earlier, Sabine gives the Darksaber to Bo-Katan, just gives it to her. And then she finally accepts it, because Sabine just finds it. She does not defeat Maul for it. She just finds it. And actually, I think Kanan might find it and then learns more about it and then gives it to her or something like that. So she just gives it to her. She's like, you are, you're actually the rightful, like you have royal blood. Like you should be the leader to help us take back our planet. And it kind of just ends with like, yeah, I'm going to lead you guys to take the planet. And that's kind of the end of that story in Rebels. It's like in the last season. And they don't really touch more in it. So when she came back and she's like, where's the Darksaber in that episode? I'm like, oh, okay. Obviously she didn't have it because we knew Moff Gideon had it. So it was like, she must have lost it. So it's pretty much saying like, oh yeah, Moff Gideon beat her for that lightsaber. So there's like two things that could have happened there. Either people knew that she was just given the Darksaber and some of the people wouldn't follow her, or they did follow her and she failed to Moff Gideon and they're planning getting to take over, and she feels like she can't make that same mistake twice and just take it. She needs to earn it to be the leader.
Dang. Yeah.
Which would, like, even if it doesn't have Grogu in some of season 3 or most of season 3, and that's kind of like the culmination is them reuniting with some like maybe some like time jump or something, maybe. Like that could be a very like interesting story to have this whole like Mandalore thing with like Din obviously being the leader because he has the Darksaber, and Bo-Katan kind of having to deal with it and creating a conflict between those two. Because and it could be a very big parallel to Clone Wars, because pretty much Maul helps Death Watch take Mandalore, and then he turns on the leader of Death Watch and earns the Darksaber by defeating him. So it could be kind of like a parallel thing, because obviously Star Wars loves to do parallels with everything, obviously. And that's always cool to see. Like there was like this awesome picture, and it was like Obi-Wan holding Luke, and then Luke holding Grogu, and then it was like the Darth Vader scene of him coming through with like the smoke and the red lightsaber, and then Luke and stuff like that. It was super cool to see all of them. And there was like there was another scene, and it had like Mando and the moment when Grogu touched his face and he took off his helmet, which made me just lose it. Like I was done. I was done. Like that. I watched it again. I swear to God, like gut punching moments like that are worse the second time, because you know it's coming. You try and prepare yourself, and it just does not work. You know, like I'm just like, oh man, like it's so good. But I think that could be an interesting third season. Like, and this show has been a very good of like, what the fuck is this? What could it be? And them like turning it on its head. Like I said, from season 1, I never thought season 2 would end up with Luke Skywalker taking we didn't even know his name, taking Baby Yoda at the end of it. I never would have guessed that in a million years, like ever.
Yeah.
And like now that it's happened, it's the only thing that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. They're doing so well with this.
It's interesting because they if they BBC'd this and just ended it right now, I think it would be perfect.
Yeah. You're right.
So I don't really know where they've got to go from here besides capping that storyline and being like, all right, this is how everybody trying to take Mandalore gathered themselves. A bunch of the Mandalorians got massacred in season 1. So the remnants have all kind of come together now. So maybe that's where they go. I think that would make the most sense. And I think it would be maybe nice if they left that storyline or the season 1 and season 2 as their own thing, and then progressed learning these characters, because that's kind of like now that's what I want to know about. Like everybody's there on the bridge, and I'm like, okay, you all have very strong characters. I want to figure out more about what you're doing, we've learned everything that we can about Grogu, and like Luke's taken over. That's fine. Like he's done his thing. I want to learn about these people a little bit more now, and learn more about the background of the Mandalorians, but more than just the little talking points here and there.
And the thing about the ones that got massacred, that's only one group of Mandalorian. You know what I mean? Like, that's just Din Djarin's group. Like Bo-Katan, like has a whole different. Like supposedly she was supposed to lead like a whole different group, and they've kind of talked about how there was like a massacre from, I guess, Moff Gideon led it, or Moff Gideon was obviously there. So like how many Mandalorian are left, or like do they go on a search to find more to take it over, or what? Like,
I think that would be the storyline that would make me happy. I'd be really satisfied.
I want to see like what happens with Cara Dune and Moff Gideon too, because he didn't die.
True.
Like he tried to kill himself, and then they like stopped it. But,
I feel like she might be like a star of that Rangers of the New Republic show. Or at least heavily involved in it, along with that other guy, the one TIE fighter that showed up a few times, or the one X-Wing fighter that showed up a few times. I feel like it'll be like kind of like those two, or maybe some new people too. Who knows? But like that one and the Ahsoka one have been said like, oh, Favreau and Filoni are behind those, and they're happening in the timeline of the Mandalorian. Because originally, before this last season, me and my friend were talking about it because we both watched Clone Wars and Rebels, and like the whole Thrawn thing coming in, we were like, oh. You know, like if a Ahsoka show happens, what if there's some big crossover like a few seasons down the road, and it's them resieging Mandalore with like everyone, because Ahsoka's involved with the Siege of Mandalore too. She has this big fight with Maul. It's fucking sick and shit like that. So it's like, oh, I wonder if they'll kind of like do that, but like have everyone come together, some crazy event thing. But it kind of seems like more like, no, that's gonna be season 3, and maybe Ahsoka's involved, but maybe not, because Sabine, who is supposedly going to meet up with Ahsoka to find Ezra, is a Mandalorian. So it's like, do they go get her? Is she involved? Is Ahsoka involved? Like, who knows? Okay. They could be. I have no idea. Because my crazy theory, though, is that because at the end of Rebels, Thrawn takes over Lothal, which is Ezra's home planet. It's like, what if Thrawn took over Mandalore? You know, like, what if he's the guy on Mandalore and they have to defeat him to do it? But if that's like season 3 of Mandalorian, I don't see that, because it's kind of like Thrawn's the thing you like build up to. He can obviously be in it. But him being defeated in a season would not make any sense at all.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting, but I love like all the Mandalorian backstory stuff. That's like the one thing I do want to learn about more, is like more of the KOTOR stuff, because I really don't know any of that other than like the references or like certain videos kind of breaking stuff down. I really know nothing about the Old Republic, and that's like one of the things I definitely want to learn more about, because everything anyone's ever said about it sounds super, super cool.
It's honestly one of I didn't mention it in the games for times, but for time rather. But without spoilers or anything, I think that both KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2 have some of the best story arcs in.
That's what I've heard.
Modern video games. I mean, they're amazingly like in depth throughout like all of the different I mean, everything from like exploring new planets and like all the other storylines and stuff like that, but just like the storyline that your main character takes of Revan and whatnot is it's just really good storytelling, and it's a really good game, so highly recommended. I'm pretty sure they're still on like the PS4 store too. I think you can.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can still. I think you can still buy them on PS4 store. I know you can buy them on Steam.
I'm gonna have to look that up, because there's been like there's been rumors like lurking that they might remaster them for like newer consoles, so which would be so. That's what I've kind of been like. I was like, oh, I'm sure there's a way I can figure out how to play them. But I was like, oh, if they remaster it, I was like, I'd rather do that, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. That would be amazing. I
don't know how valid that is, but from like a few like podcasts I follow, they were like, oh yeah, there's been like Knights of the Old Republic rumors of like movies or whatever for like years now. So I don't know how true that is, because it seems like the closest thing we're getting is that Acolyte show, which isn't even Old Republic, it's High Republic, which is hundreds of years past Old Republic. But still, even that's uncharted territory, for at least as far as movies or TV. Like, we've never seen anything that far back, you know?
Yeah, and I'm really happy that they're starting to do some of that stuff, because I don't know, that's just always been one of my I guess gripes with the series that I love is I think Red Letter Media talks about how you know, yeah, just going back to the whole trope of like it's this huge galaxy and we end up following the same 12
people.
And, but yeah,
There's also like 900 years of Yoda that would be really cool to explore.
yeah,
True.
Like, I want to see like what 500-year-old Yoda was like, you know?
That's what some
Yeah.
of the newer or the High Republic stuff is, because he's I guess he'd be like 600 to 700 years old in those. Because that's another crazy thing about Grogu if he does come back, which I think he will. Because especially when they're like, "I'll see you again, I promise," which like just rips out your heart, obviously.
Mhm.
But I was like, they have to see each other again. Like it has to happen. And I was thinking, because someone like a podcast brought up this really good point of that at age 100, Yoda was like a full-on Jedi Master. So Grogu's 50 right now. So he's about to do some insane like growing as far as like a human would do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's basically going to go through his whole life in 50 years. So like if they did a time jump somewhere in season 3 and it was like 10 years from now, like he would be like probably like a teenager or a young adult, like Yoda.
Yeah.
We still don't know. That's the crazy part. We still don't know his species. You know what I mean? Like we've only seen 3 of them ever. You know, Yoda, Yaddle, and then now Grogu. So it's like, who knows? Like that could even be wrong. That's just like what we know from past stuff. You know?
Yeah.
It was kind of weird that Ahsoka didn't mention Yaddle when like she brought up that she'd only seen one other of his
I don't think
species.
she ever saw Yaddle.
But she would know for sure, right? Because Yaddle was on the council.
I think she like because she mysteriously just because she was never on the council. I think in Clone Wars.
Oh, okay.
Which is weird. Because she only really had that one appearance in the movies, and that's it, or maybe 2. But she kind of like disappears, and they've never really explained it. Because that's what other people there are like, what the fuck about Yaddle? And I was like, I don't think she ever met Yaddle. It's the same. It's the same thing. Like Ahsoka and Grogu were literally in the same place at the same time and never met.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That was one little plot hole that I was reading about in some of the recaps. Was just like, well, wouldn't she have recognized him? But then again, also, she was how young?
She was really young.
I mean, she was really young.
She was
so
a teenager. And and she kind of went like straight. She got trained and then was fighting the war.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And she trained some younglings and stuff. But like, think about at that time how many younglings were getting trained. And him being his species, you don't think Grogu was like hidden away? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, you don't think he was like like regardless if he's Yoda's son or Yaddle's son or whatever, like you don't think that they didn't like protect them? You know what I mean? Like it was almost like a thing where like, hey, we're not holding your hand through this one, but like you can figure it out, you know? It's almost like the Darksaber. Everyone's like, that's a plot hole because she just gave it, and it's like, no, you guys are just like being reactionary rather than thinking like in the long run that they're, because that was like the whole thing that happened so many in episode 1. They're like, oh, Fennec's dead. Who are the feet there? They never explained it, and you're like, well, obviously we know it's Boba Fett because we waited and we heard we saw how it went. It's you can't put the cart before the horse there. You know what I mean? It's like
for sure.
It's because that's the way I looked at it, because I was like obviously he's like a super special like case here, and like it seems like they probably took very special care of him, and they probably kept him a secret to most people. And the big question I hope we get an answer to is we don't know who saved him from Order 66, because obviously it wasn't Luke.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, if it was Yoda, don't you think Yoda probably would have mentioned that to Luke? Maybe?
Yeah.
I think
Luke was going to kill all of his trainees in like 20 years or whatever. So, I mean, that's honestly
because Yoda didn't want to train Luke, so that would make sense.
Well, and that's that's like one of those little open-ended things where it's just kind of like, all right, but they have kind of left their universe. They've built it in a way that like, maybe it is just grasping for things to make sense, but like it would make sense though, because like there's a lot that you don't, that like you said, there's a lot that they don't like necessarily shoehorn in, where it's like, okay, well now this thing is here and we've got to explain all this stuff, but you can draw your own conclusions, and that does make sense that like if this was some race that somehow is like ultra force sensitive, like all of them, well, you wouldn't want to throw them in with the regular population then. Like, I mean, some little kid accidentally, trips and slices them with his lightsaber, then okay, I guess we just killed that.
Right.
Yeah, of course they would be shoved away somewhere and hidden and getting his own special training. Like
There is
that's
like,
not out of the question.
that's another reason why I want to see him come back, because there's the whole gap of like right now, Kylo Ren or Ben Solo is like 4 years old. And obviously in like 20 years or something is when he goes crazy and kills a ton of, like, burns down the new Jedi Order and shit like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't think Grogu was there. I just don't think he
Yeah.
was there, because I don't think they would let that, like, obviously, like, oh yeah, Kylo killed Grogu, it was like the joke of the memes after they had that Ahsoka episode, and then it was like him texting Vader and being like, I lived, bitch, or something like that. Shit like that. It'd be funny if he did that to Kylo too. Like,
Yeah.
I live, bitch. The biggest questions I have that, like, these very well could be reactionary things, not knowing the story, is that, so Luke obviously knows that the Empire is around, right? Especially after this, he's on an Imperial ship. He just fucking mowed through all these Dark Troopers. Obviously they're around. My only question is, like, is he still in touch with the New Republic? Does he not tell them, or does he tell them and they not care? Like
in the books, and actually it's funny because like the Yuzan Vong series I was talking about earlier, Ben Solo does the same thing that he's doing now, where he like is like a disciple of Luke and kills all the other disciples, which is kind of crazy that they decided to do that. But because it's literally what, like, they don't call him Kylo Ren, but he like basically tries to become a Sith Lord in these books. But fuck, what was I gonna say? What were we talking about? I'm sorry.
Like, if Luke knows the Empire is still around, how does the New Republic not know?
In the books, at least the books that I read, Luke kind of just like fucked off and was like doing his own thing, like trying to restart a Jedi temple.
Yeah.
And then like the Empire was around, but it's not like how it was. They were just like all on the outer rims, just like trying, and like all the Grand Admirals were trying to, or the Moffs were trying to like figure out who's going to lead, basically. So I feel like that's kind of like the storyline they're going with here a little bit.
Because that's kind of how they did it there's like Prelude comics that like showed, that are canon, that show it's kind of like the same thing. And they do it in Battlefront 2. It's like what I said, he's like trying to learn more about the Jedi stuff, and it's like him searching. And I was just wondering, like, I don't know if they explain like, oh, he's fully disconnected from them, or like he doesn't talk to Leia at all, even though he has his fucking son with them, and they're not like, yo, like the Empire's like here, like you guys want to take it out, but it definitely could be possible, because they've kind of shown that the New Republic are very oblivious to what the fuck is going on and what's actually happening. And obviously even Cara Dune's a ranger of the New Republic, and she obviously knows the fucking Empire's there. They were on the planet she's on. Like, she knows.
Yeah.
So I guess I answered my own question that they probably just didn't care. But there is an interesting thing. It's like I was saying, I think Grogu will come back, and you kind of want to see that, like, where is he during the sequel trilogy? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, what are him and Mando doing? But at the same time, it is a huge universe, so it's like maybe they could be off doing their own thing. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a situation where, like, I mean, I think that it would be. I can't see a situation where Grogu gets killed by Kylo. I feel like it would.
God, no.
It would have to be a situation where he starts training and then maybe he breaks away, or is like, because they obviously age differently. Maybe Grogu gets to the point where he realizes that Luke isn't necessarily the best teacher because of obvious things that happen later, and he just leaves, because that does happen. And there also is like a little bit of a weird philosophical thing that you can think about with the whole idea of like Star Wars being like, there's got to be balance. And so it's interesting to me when you see things like that, where it's like, okay, so Luke is here, he sees that there's obviously the Empire, but maybe he chooses to step back because he's like, well, the last time that Jedi were really running the show, we fucked everything up, and we also committed genocide on Mandalore. So it is, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where like maybe he really does take the more high-minded monk sense of just like, I'm gonna step back, and that also kind of recontextualizes who he is in the new trilogy too, because everybody says like, oh, he doesn't act like a Jedi Knight. He just kind of fucks around, because it's just like, well, yeah, kind of, because like he realizes, well, if I do the Jedi thing again and raise all like another Jedi army, it's just going to perpetuate more war. So I'm just going to drink this milk and fuck off,
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah, that might honestly be the most sage thing that you can do in that moment, is just to sit back and be, I'm above this. Like, I don't know, maybe like
I could see that.
that is technically restoring balance, is it not? I mean, that's
Yeah.
a way to look at it.
Yeah, because I always thought, like, everyone's like, that's not my Luke Skywalker. And I was like, after what they explained, even without this Grogu stuff, which you could obviously add way more, if Grogu does step away and be like, hey, this isn't working, like, I need to go back to like my surrogate dad and like go be with him. It's like, then he would fail 2 apprentices. You know what I mean? That adds more weight to the whole thing.
Exactly.
And one being his sister's fucking son, like, I'm sure that one hit a little harder, well, one's being like, hey, this is the same species as the one who taught me everything I know. And then second to be like, oh, hey, my sister's son is now, the biggest evil leader in the fucking galaxy. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. And there was another comparison made that Ahsoka, since she's from like the old school of being like, hey, your emotions and attachments can lead to the dark side. We saw it with Anakin, which that moment was that one stung me pretty hard, being like, I've seen what this can happen to fully trained Jedi, the best of us. And I was like, fuck, that one hurt. That one hurt me real hard, because even in the last season of Clone Wars, you see the last interaction between Ahsoka and Anakin before he turns to Vader, and it's a rough one. And so that line, I was like, wow, that sucks. And then so she's like, oh, no emotion. But it's funny that she still kind of holds that, because she was wronged by the Jedi Order completely and left it and kind of like lived the same way Luke did. And Luke was the exact opposite. He saw that like emotion and attachment helped him win. It helped him. It helped him beat Vader and get back his father and everything like that. So I think Luke saw like, he can probably sense the emotion in him, and he sees that probably as a good thing rather than a bad thing. And that could be leading to more of like exactly what you said, like, oh, maybe this is bad, like maybe all of this is wrong. And that's like one of the most interesting to Star Wars to me, is that both sides are usually wrong, no matter what. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Both sides have insane flaws. Like we saw in the prequels, like the Jedi's hubris, like let them to get fucking massacred. But at the same time, you have this dude who's just looking to fucking destroy everything. So it's like, either side is really right. Exactly. Like the whole new trilogy fights for freedom. They get this freedom, and it's all this weird, fucked up, corrupt. We don't know what the fuck we're doing, but we're here, and it's not the Empire, so cool, good enough, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like two sides.
Line where he's just like, yeah, it's just like, it doesn't matter who's pointing a gun at you. Someone's still pointing a gun at you. Like,
yeah. There is one thing. I'm guessing Luke probably doesn't come back ever again. It's probably like a one-time thing. It's probably the best way to do it that way. But the one thing
I would hope so.
If they do
I
a
would
CGI
hope so.
Luke, I would be so pissed.
I think they did it well for the scene, but
there's only one scene I would want to see, and that's him and Ahsoka talking. So like he can tell Ahsoka, hey, he saved my life. Like he turned around, because I feel like that moment would be very cool. But I'm also fine if he doesn't get it, because that's like the biggest question. She's like, there's not many of us out there. Does Ahsoka even know that Luke exists? You know what I mean? Probably not.
I mean,
which is crazy.
Like, she wouldn't know. Like she would know that the Emperor died, but she wouldn't know how he died, and it would be cool to know. Like, hey, Anakin turned at the end.
Exactly.
Or even if like sometime Grogu does it and he like relays that to her or something, like that would be like, I just want that so bad. It would be such a beautiful moment for her to like realize that like, oh my God, my master was good in the. I mean, I have this like weird argument that he wasn't really redeemed because he killed like millions of people.
Yeah.
And he just saved one guy. I mean, that's not really redeemed. Like some people call Vader an anti-hero, and I was like, I wouldn't go that far.
I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
A little much. I was like, I would say that Kylo redeemed himself more than Vader, but you haven't seen the last movie, so I guess you can't really talk to that too much, but like
Yeah,
it's
of
the same
course.
thing. It's like, yo, Kylo like blew up multiple planets,
Yeah.
even though he helped save the day in the end. I mean, cool, but like still pretty fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I love like the whole Vader turn being your father and the whole climax of having that beautiful moment. It's awesome. It's good storytelling. It really is.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Honestly, revolutionary for its time. But
Mhm.
I think the whole Vader was redeemed is a little bit overdone. That dude still killed millions of people. It's like if Hitler came back in the end and saved the
Yeah.
day. Is Hitler really redeemed? Not
Yeah,
really.
No.
Not really. That's the way I like to compare it. It's like, let's compare us in real life and see if you'd feel the same way. Like, the ending is cool. It's great. It's a beautiful moment. But
Yeah.
Vader would have to send like an apology tweet. Drafts, like, yo, I did not know I was.
Scream it with your
he'd have to hold a press conference.
Mhm.
He'll be stepping away from the Death Star for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I'll be taking a hiatus from the Death Star.
Yeah.
I need to learn my lesson, guys. Sorry. That's really funny. So obviously Star Wars announced like a million new things. It was almost overwhelming, but all pretty
Yeah.
exciting. What's your favorite thing that got announced?
You got one?
Well, it didn't get announced until the end of that episode, but as a Boba Fett fan, like, seriously, I'm so excited for that. I am also excited to see some Obi-Wan stuff, because I know that Obi-Wan and Vader are supposed to face off in that series, which is gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Is there any other moments for Mandalorian you wanted to add in? I know both of us talked probably way too much.
I pretty much said like everything I need to say. Like I don't know. Like the only thing I can say is like I had to pause like the Luke scene because Nick, our drummer, called us, and like,
oh no,
I was like in the middle of crying, and he's like, "Dude, come over and do some beer bongs with me." I'm like, "All right, man." Like,
okay, man, I'll be right there.
I'll be right there. He's like, "Are you crying?" I was like, "Yeah, I can't explain this to you.
I really need it right now."
So yeah. Yeah, I've said all I need to say, I think, about the Mandalorian.
I'm glad we're all on the same page of being completely torn to pieces by that.
Yeah.
Last scene. I didn't
like
obviously they builded to like them him going off with someone else, but I almost didn't think it would happen this season. I thought we'd get like teased with the Jedi at the end or something.
Yeah.
You know? But like, wow, they did it.
This is perfect. Absolutely perfect.
I think the only other little thing that I wanted to talk about with the Mandalorian was just some of the little Easter eggs for fucking like little things like vibro knives. I don't think a vibro knife is seen in the movies ever.
I don't think so
but
either.
They're, especially in KOTOR, that's like one of your first things. They're like littered all over the books and all over the games and like everywhere else, but you like never see them in the movies. And there's one scene where this is just like another perfect example of like sensible fan service, where they like a guy like brings, I forget who it was, I think it might have been a stormtrooper, like brings one out, and they like just slowly they quickly like pan past it, and you can see that it's like vibrating, but there's never anything where it's like, oh, he's got a vibro knife, or like, they don't like explain that, but to like somebody who's watching that and you see the knife, and they took the time to just animate a little bit around the knife to make it look like it's moving. And it's just like, oh, that's brilliant. Like they didn't have to hit anybody over the head with it. It's just if you know the Star Wars universe, you're like, holy shit, they finally, after 30 years of this being a thing, they finally put a fucking vibro knife in.
I think it was in
all over the place.
It was in like the Mandalorian layer in season 1. I think it's funny.
Yeah.
It's the big Mandalorian. I think when him and Din Djarin have that like face off.
Yeah,
I think he pulls it out, which is funny because he's a Vizsla, which Vizsla is like Clan Vizsla is the one who like started Death Watch and like had the Darksaber in the beginning. So like so the pre-Vizsla, who is from the Clone Wars, who introduced the Darksaber into like the Star Wars universe, was voiced by John Favreau. Okay,
for sure. Yeah.
Directed by Dave Filoni. And then the same guy who voices this Vizsla was also John Favreau. Like,
oh, wow. Really?
Like, how crazy is that? Like,
that's awesome. Dang.
which obviously we're kind of led to know that they died in that ending or whatever after like episode 3 when that
Yeah.
huge fucking Mandalorian fucking rescue happens, which was so sick. Like that's what I love
Yeah.
about this show, especially after watching Clone Wars or Rebels and like learning all this like Mandalorian lore, is that you just keep learning more of it. It's like such a cool thing to learn because it's so different than like, I mean, we've said it a million times, it's so different than anything we've ever seen. Like with Jedi or Sith, it's just like there's so many other things that exist, and like this is a completely different one that we've learned so much about in 16 episodes, you know?
Yeah, and they bring in like so much of the speeders and the equipment and like the guns that they use are like all, because that was like one thing that I noticed about like the new trilogy was like the ships, they like do like slightly different ships. They do it like just had a little bit of a like we can make more toys vibe to it, you know. But like with the Mandalorian, it's like they bring out a DC-15 pistol, and you know there's a DL-22 blaster, things like that, where it's like, okay, you can tell stormtrooper that brings out a DL-22 blaster, that's Han Solo's blaster, but it's stock. It doesn't have all the stuff that Han Solo put on it, you know. So it's got like all of that super in-depth stuff where it's like they bring out a swoop bike and it's like, oh, I owned that swoop bike in Star Wars Galaxies. Like that is the one. They didn't just throw a bunch of fucking like I don't know, a bunch of construction materials together and go like, all right, it's a swoop bike. It's like they went through the time to go, we're gonna put like one that existed in the universe actually. And you know, it's like that's so cool. They weren't lazy about it.
And even them they did it like twice in this season. It was like old AT-ATs that they made into like cranes or whatever.
So good.
It's like I definitely do not know all the shit about guns and like bikes and shit that you do. That's fucking wild. But like
it's literally just Galaxies. But yeah,
it's just
being
shit.
A fucking nerd.
It's sick. It's just shit like that. That's the amount of like attention and love they put into the show, which is crazy. That's so like that's amazing. Like imagine thinking of all those things and putting them into already a show that has an incredible story, bringing in all these characters from like all different versions of Star Wars canon and even not canon, and still being able to have those types of details in it. Like that's crazy.
It redeemed the series for me. Like they're all of it. Like I was kind of like with the new trilogy, I was kind of like falling out of love with Star Wars, and then like this came in and like saved everything. Honestly,
there's because it's like those little things that are just a little grounding, you know. Like it's when you get a new storyline and then like literally everything in the universe looks like a little bit different.
Right.
It's like, okay, obviously things have like upgraded, but like, you know, when you start the Mandalorian and it's like, okay, yes, like stormtroopers use this stuff, they have this gear, there's like these special units that might have something different, but like the things that made the universe the physical universe that we grew up with, like having them at least pay attention enough to be like, all right, they use these carbines, they use these rifles, this is what they do. We're not going to go to the effects team and be like, all right, let's give the intern a new job, make us some wild gun. It's just like, no, they use these guns. Like, this is the Empire, they do this, you know?
Oh, there was even
it's just kind of nice.
There was even the container that held the Beskar in season 1. Mm-hmm. It's like literally like an ice cream box, but it was used in the original trilogy in like a scene.
Yep. Yeah.
And they just brought it back for this. Like, it just adds to more of what we're saying. Like it's crazy. Like they added Loth Cats in season 1 and season 2, which are from Rebels. Those are other things that are like, oh, we're pointing to Ezra. You know, that's from his home planet and stuff like that. But it's just like all this shit, and like that stuff's never been live action before. You know, it's only been in animation, and they're just bringing that shit in. And like thing you were saying about the Crate Dragon and everything like that. It's just like. It's so I get so excited seeing people like, holy fuck, like it's from this game I played that's like no one's ever heard of, you know? It's like, like how much do you have to know all that shit? Like I just like want to be in a room hearing them like plan like you kind of see it. Like I don't know if you guys watched the galleries for season 1, like the behind the scenes stuff.
No, I haven't.
Oh, dude,
what is that?
Okay, so it's a documentary of like all the behind the scenes of season 1. And they're starting one for season 2 starting on December 2, which I can't wait to see the behind the scenes of this season. So they have like one episode was like about all the directors who did stuff on it. Like another episode was like about like a bunch of the actors. One episode was all about the score, which is something we haven't even talked about. But the score for this fucking show is in fucking
Yes.
insane.
Yeah. Yep.
Like especially this last episode. Like what the fuck? Like all the different like styles of music he put in. Like obviously it's like because that was when the Mandalorian first came out. Like obviously everyone's so used to Star Wars music. Like John Williams' music is iconic. So
of course.
When it first came out, I was like almost like thrown off. Like I was like, well, this is weird. But after like the second or third episode, you're like, no, this is Mandalorian. Like I'm ready for the Mandalorian. You know what I mean? Like as soon as you hear like the main theme coming, you're like, okay, yeah, I'm fucking ready to go.
I love how so much of the music has like a Western kind of like Clint Eastwood kind of vibe too. You know,
that's a thing we haven't even talked about.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
also,
I was in my mind. I was like, we have to talk about the score, and it just popped up.
Yeah, and just the what was it, the episode what was it, 6 I think of the second season, or 5, I can't remember, but the one that's like, I mean the whole thing is kind of a tribute to spaghetti westerns, but the one that is like very much a like we're like dropping some very huge hints of like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Fistful of Dollars and all the old like Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. Yeah. And
they have that like brief standoff.
Yeah, there's I can't remember exactly.
They do the shot of like the holster at the side.
Oh, the Ahsoka episode this season.
Yeah.
The craziest one about that one, it was because they obviously like Star Wars is based heavily in Western and samurai stuff. In that episode, they had both the parallels like directly next. They had the Ahsoka standoff that was like straight up a samurai film, and then they had the Mandalorian standoff that was straight up a Western, like happening like scene by scene, which I thought was like so fucking cool.
Yeah,
and
seeing the people in the towns like hiding in their buildings, like while the gunfight's happening on the main. Like,
and so like what's crazy is like when I was watching this with Liz, I was like trying to explain to her like what's happening right now is like Star Wars is referencing The Good and the Bad and the Ugly and like all those spaghetti westerns, which themselves were referencing Seven Samurai and all of those things. So I was like, literally what's happening right now is like a thing referencing a thing while acknowledging that it's also been referencing another thing. The whole thing is just wrapped into this little package where I was like, they're doing the town battle of like Seven Samurai, and they're also doing a little tribute to just in the dialogue and like the body mannerisms in the way that it's shot is a tribute sort of to the ending stand of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. So I think I texted you, and I don't do this usually because I also like, I stay off social media. I like save these conversations for in person, but I think I did text Nick after that. And I was like, that's one of the better pieces of just media in general that I've taken in the past decade. Like outside of Star Wars, the fact that they're not just doing the fan service, but also including a very heavy-handed like sort of tribute to or acknowledgement of where all of these influences are coming from is just like, fuck, that's good. That's such good writing. That was
as soon as they had that standoff with Ahsoka in like that, like the terrace of I was like, that's like straight up Kill Bill, which obviously Kill Bill is straight up like Kurosawa films, but like obviously like Kill Bill is more fresh in my brain than Kurosawa movies.
For sure.
I was like, if I say Kill Bill, people are like, oh yeah, Kill Bill. That makes sense. You know, if you say like, it's not like I'm a Kurosawa nerd or anything. I'm not. But like, if I said Kurosawa, they'd be like, what the fuck is that? You know? What I mean? But I saw that, I was like, that's fucking so cool. I was like, this is wild that they're going into that, and I love this fucking show. It's crazy.
Yeah, we're all in agreement on that. That's
oh my god. Especially this season, the score has like, going back to the score, they've sprinkled in all like the OG themes, like when Ahsoka mentions Yoda, the Yoda themes played under and shit like that, and like I do believe the Snoke theme is played when they see those weird clones, which is crazy foreshadowing there.
Interesting.
Like obviously the Luke theme played and the Ahsoka theme played and everything like that. I'm pretty sure they've done the Imperial March a few times. at this point.
Yeah.
It's just so cool that he's like incorporating that with like almost like a new flair to it.
Yeah.
With his own style. That dude is so good. That dude is a genius. Like
100%.
he did Black Panther and both Creed movies, I think, too. So it's not it's not like he's some like new guy. He's like definitely watching the gallery stuff because it's wild. And I don't know if do you know how they film the crazy like set pieces?
No.
So most every set they do, it's an LED screen.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, they have a whole episode. They call it The Volume. And I had no idea until I watched this. It's fucking insane. There's even like some YouTube videos on it that just like briefly show you. So it's not green screen at all. Some of the stuff is shot on location and then stuff's added after. But like most of the show is completely like, it's kind of what they do with CGI is they build some of the scene and then the whole backdrop is just an LED screen. But they film like the LED screen. It's not like added in post. They film the LED screen. So like anytime they're in space, it's like a straight up LED screen behind them. And all the actors said it's amazing because it's like you're not acting in front of a green fucking background. You're acting like in the fucking environment.
That's
crazy.
Gotta be so good. That's gonna be so much easier to.
And even there's like no full CGI things. Like even Grogu is a puppet, and they just add CGI on top of it to make it more perfect. So it's like even like like that one of those last scenes with Grogu and Din Djarin had that moment. Like that's like him actually touching his face and shit. Like and also like hats off to that motherfucker for the acting in that shit, or even him conveying so many like emotions and stuff through just his voice. Like, hats off to that dude. I know there was like all these weird rumors that came out. They're like, oh, he wants to show his face more, and he's leaving after season 2, which like obviously have been completely debunked. And like as soon as I saw that stuff, I was like, I don't believe that's true. Like that's just sounds stupid. And like,
I'm glad that his helmet didn't come off until that.
Yeah, like
it's so much more powerful.
Yeah,
obviously we saw it in the episode before, but
when he had to access the database.
Yeah, but because I saw like one video was like, I think it took away the weight, and I'm like, no, like he did it to like find the kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was all like, and it was all set up from Cobb Vanth in the first episode, and then Bo-Katan being like, no, you were just raised by a bunch of fucking psychopaths, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, and then it was like what Bill Burr was talking to him about when they were like in the walker or whatever, going to drop it off. He was like, yeah, you say you have these boundaries or whatever that you swear by, but like, look at how much further you've moved past your boundaries just in putting on that like stormtrooper outfit.
True.
Like your boundaries aren't real. You'll do what you need to do to save like who you love.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that whole conversation is like, I know some people complained about his character in the first season or whatever because they called it Space Boston. That's like the big thing. They're like, why does someone in space have a Boston accent? And it's like, well, why does someone in space speak a completely different language you've never heard of? Why does mostly everyone have a British accent? Like, you know what I mean?
Are you a fan of Bill Burr, of like his comedy?
It's like hit or miss. Some stuff, like I watch SNL, which I know a lot of people don't like SNL, and I'm not going to say all of it is amazing, but most of it I find pretty entertaining. And like his monologue, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, Bill Burr's monologue!" People either loved it or hated it. I watched it, and I was like, "It was okay." Like I watched Dave Chappelle's monologue, and I was like, "That was amazing! Like that was incredible."
Yeah,
but like I watched
I'm kind of a fan of Drew, but like the funny thing about it is I was like watching an interview about him, and he does not care about Star Wars at all.
Bill Burr,
and he like does.
That's amazing.
He's just like, yeah, fuck it, I don't care. Like it was a paycheck or whatever. And like he was talking about like how all his family members are like freaking out that he's like in Star Wars, and he's like, I made a fucking career as a comedian. Like I'm a millionaire off my own comedy, and nobody cares. But like I'm in Star Wars, and now it's like all of a sudden the big thing.
Dude, it's funny because he's like obviously shown in this season he's a really good actor. He was also in the King of Staten.
Breaking Bad too.
Oh yeah, have you seen the King of Staten Island? Pete Davidson's movie. No.
Sorry, was it?
I said, have you seen the King of Staten Island?
No, I haven't, but I really, really want to, man. It's
really, really good. Even if you're not a fan of Pete Davidson or not a fan of Bill Burr, it's like not what you're expecting. It's not like over the top Pete Davidson on SNL. It's kind of like a mockumentary on his life in a way. Like it's like based on events that happened in his actual life. But that movie is so good. Like I was gonna watch it anyway, and I watched it. And I was like, wow, that was like I did not expect the performances coming out of either of them because like Bill Burr's in it too, and I was just like, this dude is like really good. Like he's like a really good actor.
I heard like some incredible. Like I saw the previews for it, and I was like, man, I need to see this at some point. But
it's good.
I just haven't gotten around to it.
It's I definitely recommend it. It's a good watch.
Yeah. Putting it on the list.
Yeah, I have a long list of movies I need to watch too, so I feel you.
Yeah, do you have like a top 10 of this year?
I do. I just did an episode of my top 5. It's kind of a weird list in a way. But like Tenet was up there, which is if you like Christopher Nolan, you'll love it. If you're not a fan of Christopher Nolan, I don't think you'll like it. But it's pretty much like Interstellar and Inception had a crazier baby, pretty much. It's wild. Like half of the movie is explaining the movie to you. It's crazy. I need to watch it. I need to watch it again, but that's a really good one. Palm Springs is up there for me, which was another surprising movie. If you haven't watched it, don't look up any trailers. It's on Hulu. Just watch it. Because I don't want to say anything about it because it'll kind of ruin the premise of it. And I went into it blind, and it made the movie better for me. Trial of the Chicago 7 I thought was really good, even though I guess the real life events it was kind of like not done as serious as what happened in the movie, which is kind of a bummer, but I still liked it. King of Staten Island was up there for me. It wasn't my top 5, but it was pretty good. Surprisingly, Mulan I loved.
I haven't seen that yet.
A lot of people talked mad shit about it.
Oh, really? I haven't really seen much, but
it's nothing.
The original is so good that it's like hard to.
Yeah.
It's nothing like the original. It's the main story, but it's like a war drama, like straight up.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
But to me, like I watched it with like a group of women, and seeing how it like affected them was like cool to me, I guess.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was really well done. Because like it's funny though, because like with all these Disney live action remakes, they're like it's the same as the cartoon, and then they make one different. And they're like it's not like the cartoon.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What do you want? I thought it was really good. Which is funny because obviously Ming-Na Wen Fennec is the original voice of Mulan. She's I think she's the only woman to be like the Disney trifecta. She's been in Marvel, she's been in Star Wars, and she's a Disney princess technically.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Huh.
Also, she's 57.
Huh.
Yeah.
Damn.
It's crazy.
Impressive.
Which it made me because well, we're not rich, so probably not.
Yeah, you're right.
also, like, yeah. But it's funny though, and like the age thing, because technically Bo-Katan should be like 60 something, if like the timeline is correct, because she's like in her 20s or something during the Clone Wars.
Oh wow, yeah.
But everyone's like, because I think Kevin Smith brought it up in his podcast. They're like, wouldn't Bo-Katan be like 60 years old by now? And they're like, well, yeah, we don't know how Mandalorians actually age, like true people from Mandalore.
I mean yeah,
like
shit, but
that's true. Yeah, well,
he's also a clone, survived a Sarlacc pit, and lives on Tatooine.
Yeah,
that's true. And he was in a goddamn Sarlacc. So
yeah, because they've kind of proven that Tatooine ages you faster, like they did with Obi-Wan, pretty much. Because he's in one episode of Rebels, and he's already like older, and that's like right before I think it's like a few years before A New Hope. So it's like, if you think about it, there's only like 10 years between, or 20 years between Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. And it's like not like the dude. It wouldn't be normal for Ewan McGregor at the end of Revenge of the Sith to be an old man by A New Hope, other than to be like Tatooine ages you more, right?
Yeah,
space.
True enough.
It's also like a thing where it's like space. We don't understand how any of that shit works because we don't live in that galaxy. We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We don't know. What would life be like with two suns? Probably terrible.
Yeah, probably.
Probably very hot.
Yeah.
And uncomfortable.
That was always one of my favorite planets, though.
Yeah.
See, I thought it was really pretty.
Binary sunset, man.
It's like space Seattle.
Yeah, Camino would be pretty cool.
I thought the first scene, I thought we were going to Camino.
Yeah.
I felt it in my bones, but they could still go there. Because the patch on him is a Camino patch.
Well, how crazy would it be if Boba went to Camino and in his part of the saga?
That would be wild.
And just, like,
that would be interesting.
Just killed all the colonies.
That'd be
Just
bad.
killed himself. It's a metaphor for
Oh
ego.
my god. But there was a weird rumor that Tamora Morrison could play Rex because Rex is technically still alive,
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Oh yeah.
which would be cool for him to see. It's basically he just doesn't look as fucked up and has a beard.
Yeah.
He does not look like he's been through a Sarlacc pit, and he has a beard.
I'm interested to see if they're gonna take this the Boba Fett story and run it as like because they're talking about doing like with the new series that they announced. They're talking about doing that spy drama. I forget what it was called. Something with an A.
Acolyte.
Yeah, or was it Acolyte? I'm trying to think. There was I can't think of the name. I don't have them pulled up in front of me, but I'm just wondering like with their like we were talking about with the new series kind of like continuing to expand upon all these things if they're going to run the Fett series and follow like going deeper into like the Hutt crime family thing and like run in with him like kind of taking that over and then getting more of a glimpse into that side of the galaxy that they don't.
Someone brought up a good point.
Develop?
Yeah, someone brought up a good point that like Fennec saved Cara Dune in that moment when her like blaster was like stuck or jammed or whatever, because from that end events it kind of seems like they'll be on opposite ends, like opposite sides towards each other, because like I mean they kind of set up that he's going to be the new crime boss, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's obviously like our Ranger of the New Republic, so it's like I wonder if like I'm curious to see how the ones who, because obviously this is in the same time period as Mandalorian, obviously. I wonder how all of these will cross over anymore. You know what I mean? Like I would imagine they would, you know, because they've already crossed over to lead them into these new shows. So I'm interested to see how they tie in.
They do have like a good evil and then sort of a neutral thing going now, where it's like, especially with the Mandalorians, they're not, they sort of serve as the thing that balances out the Jedi, where it's like, okay, you guys are supposed to be good, but also you've done a lot of fucked up stuff. So like, it's all about the balance. Like, it's interesting because you see sort of the neutral faction developing, where it's like, all right, there's the Empire, and then there's been the Republic, but what about all the people that keep on getting fucking blown up and that are just trying to make ends meet? You know, so it'll be interesting to see that sort of decide, I think. But
yeah. I have no idea where that Boba Fett series is going, but I'm here for it.
I'm excited for it.
You've read the books, right?
I read the Bounty Hunters Guild stuff, but all of that stuff just kind of explores like his life before the Sarlacc pit.
Okay, for sure.
And then I know there's like some shoot off where he does take over like Jabba's syndicate, which I guess is Bib Fortuna's syndicate or whatever. But like, I don't know. Like, I don't know where it's gonna go.
Yeah, because the Cobb Vanth stuff is straight from a book. They kind of expanded upon it a little bit, but it is pretty similar to what happened. He's like the marshal of a town, and he finds the armor. And
also, that's right.
I don't know if you guys know about the McClunky thing. Have you heard about this?
No.
Oh yeah.
What is
that
this?
Like that's something Greedo said to Han.
Yeah.
Like
so.
Right before he got shot.
Yeah, so George Lucas has changed the Han shot first scene about 1 million times, and when Disney,
is there another change?
Yeah. So when Disney Plus came up, a bunch of like because I think they uploaded them with all the extra features and stuff. So one of the scenes was Greedo yells out McClunky, and they say McClunky in that after credit scene. I think Bib Fortuna says McClunky. Someone in that last scene says McClunky. And
it means like good to see you or something.
Yeah.
Does it? Oh, okay.
I had no idea what it means. I just thought it was some weird random word that he threw in because George Lucas is down in his basement and he's like, what can I add to change this now? Oh, I'll get them McClunky. You know, like him just being a fucking weirdo in his basement changing it. Like, I'll get these fucking nerds McClunky.
I just want to know when he licenses a toy for that scene where you can flip a switch and Han's neck moves over. And
God, so
it's like I haven't heard anyone brought it up other than when I was like, did he just say McClunky? And I was like, I think he said McClunky, and then I rewatched it and I was like, he definitely said McClunky. That's fucking funny.
That's great.
it blew up on the internet like after everything went up on Disney Plus because people obviously found it and they're like, McClunky,
Yeah.
what the fuck is this? Like it's so ridiculous.
Like put no effort in this language at all.
Yeah, McClunky.
McClunky, Madonky.
It's so weird. But I guess he did a bunch of weird random edits that piss people off, I guess. I don't know. People get mad about weird things.
What are some of the other weird things that I might be mad about?
The biggest one that I am actually mad about is that they took out the Force Ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi. That was the actor who played the stand-in for that played like the face actor for Darth Vader, and they made it Hayden.
Yeah.
Which is fucked up because Hayden was a dick.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Anakin was the worst of them all. He did not get redeemed, or whatever we talk about redeemed, but like it wasn't him. It was the older version of him. So that's pretty lame. Something that's kind of cool that they did, which kind of sucks for the original guy, is that they redubbed Boba Fett's voice to be Tamora Morrison after he played Jango Fett.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So all of his lines now are all Tamora Morrison. They did it. Yeah. They did it like right when the prequels came out after he played.
The actor that played Boba Fett just died this week.
Yeah. Such a bummer. Someone posted a picture and it was like all of like the latest people who, like died from Star Wars. Like this like nice like little image, and I was like, man, that hurts. We got a lot of loss in 2020. It was big bummer. Very very big bummer.
Yes, it has been. The Mandalorian's been like the only good thing.
I'm not gonna lie, I've had a pretty good year, all things considering. For somehow, I'm in a very lucky. I'm very lucky to be in the position I am in. And I also like to look on the bright side of things. I went through too many things in the past few years that were terrible to know to make the best of whatever situation. And my situation is very good, so I don't like to be like, oh, this year sucks. Which I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like obviously a ton of stuff I wanted to do wasn't possible, but at the same time, like I have a house, I have a wife, we're not struggling, so like for all intents and purposes, I'm doing great. In
a couple of years, we're gonna get the George Lucas re-edit of 2020. And we're gonna,
the McClunky edition.
We're gonna dodge, man.
The McClunky edition. Can't wait.
Yeah, we're all alive, and we all got to survive to watch this series. So
and we have the time to sit around for a few hours and talk about Star Wars, which is always great.
Yeah,
always a good
definitely.
time. Before we wrap this up, is there anything you guys want to plug? Anything band wise, personal wise, whatever?
I mean, we're in the middle of writing a record. I don't know what else do we have that's coming out. We have anything really?
We got some shirts and stuff coming up, maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean we've got merch. We've got some sick merch drops coming. Limited
edition bundles for the tours. I don't know. We're gonna record pretty soon, so that's exciting. And then we're all involved in a bunch of other projects that are gonna be recording soon too. So
yeah, just taking some time to just make some more stuff and get it ready for when we can get back on the road again. So
yeah, I'm excited to book some stuff for you guys eventually.
Yeah, can't wait to hang out in person.
Nice.
Me either. Yeah. That'll be great. When you guys come up here, you can come stay at the house and stuff. That'll be cool.
Please.
You can
pet my hang
dogs.
out and nerd about this shit in person, and
you can pet my little doggies.
Yeah, love that.
They love people. So
what kind of dogs do you have?
I have 2 corgis.
I love corgis.
Yeah, they're adorable. They get very excited with people, and then they just get cuddly right after.
Nice.
They're like so excited when they see new people. They're like all over you, like, oh my god, new people.
Yeah.
And then they just chill out.
Yeah.
They're great.
Dogs be dogs.
Yeah, dogs be dogs, man. Awesome, man. Thank you guys so much for doing this. This was awesome.
Yeah. Next time there's a new Star Wars thing, we should do it again.
I am down. More than down.
Yeah.
It seems like it'll be a year before that, but
let's how about what if we watch Rebels or like go through some of the older stuff and then we can come back and have part 2.
Dude, I am down. I will talk about Rebels for hours.
I need any excuse to talk about Star Wars because I don't do it enough.
Yeah, so give us like 2 whatever, and we'll.
Yeah, let's reconvene because
I'm
I
down.
want to learn about some of the stuff that you were bringing up some references, and I was like, holy shit, I don't know as much as I thought I did.
Knowing
We gotta
your level, your guys' level of nerddom in Star Wars, you will fully appreciate Clone Wars and Rebels. Like you will,
yeah.
you will fall in love. Like,
Sick.
like I'm telling you, the last season of Rebels has moments just like this ending season. Like it,
Cool.
like there's sometimes where I'll stay up and like we're in bed and Sam's asleep and she's like, "Yeah, watch whatever." Usually we'll watch anime before we go to bed. But
Mhm.
sometimes like there's a bunch of stuff I watch by my own just because she works retail and doesn't have time to watch it with me.
Yeah.
And when I was watching Rebels, she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to bed." And I was like watching it, and I'm like literally, she's like sleeping next to me, and I'm just like crying, laying down.
Yeah.
I'm like, why? Why is a cartoon doing this to me? That was me. Yeah, at like 2 a.m, just being like, oh my god, fuck you, Dave Filoni. I should have known that something was coming in this season because he did it to me in a fucking cartoon.
Yeah.
Bastard. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Probably got to go feed my dogs now. Anyway, speaking of my dogs.
Nice.
All right. I'll talk to you guys there.
Yep. Take it easy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. That's it for this one, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a good Christmas. Have a good New Year's. Obviously, we'll be back next year with new episodes. I'm very excited to get back in the swing of things with this. It's felt very awesome to talk nerd stuff with my friends from all across the country through Zoom, obviously, but it's felt very awesome. As always, if you want to support the podcast, hit that subscribe and Apple Podcasts, rate 5 stars, write a review, follow on Spotify. We're at social media at Metalcore Nerds, www.metalcorenerds.com. Merch is still on sale. Until next time, this is Metalcore Nerds.